We'll call the meeting to order, we're dealing with, pursuant to Standing Order 83-1, pre-budget consultations in advance of the 2017 budget, continuing our series of meetings with the regional development agencies across Canada. So we're pleased to have here today the Department of Western Economic Diversification, Mr. Salambier, who's the Assistant Deputy Minister of the British Columbia region. James Medding. I'm wondering, James, what your riding is. You've been here every day this week. Good to see you again.
Thank you.
And Mr. Sutherland, who's the Director, Policy Planning and External Relations. So you have the floor, and then we'll go to questions. Thank you for coming.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. It's my great pleasure to be here in front of the committee today. I'll be talking to you today about the state of the BC economy and some of the challenges and opportunities therein, as well as give you a bit of a thumbnail sketch of what we do in Western economic diversification in British Columbia. So let me start with some of the basics of the structure of the BC economy. La province de la Colombie-Britannique compte deux moteurs.
The province of British Columbia has two main economic drivers, very diversified economic services. My notes here are for the Lower Mainland and also the south of the island of Vancouver. In these two regions, we have a very diverse economy, but there are rural economies based basically on natural resources. The service sector of BC contributes 76% of our GDP. The section comprises industries such as finance, shipping, engineering, education, film production, very important to us, tourism, and high tech. Given that BC has a relatively small domestic market, the wealth creation of our province depends heavily on exporting natural resources, which account for about 75% of the province's merchandise exports. The U.S. remains BC's largest customer, consuming 52% of export sales in 2015. However, exports to Asia have grown rapidly over the last decade. Asia is now the destination of 38% of the province's export sales. Job creation is another new shift and key to BC's economic success. The province's high-tech sector employs 87,000 workers at this point, more than the province's once dominant forest industry, which now employs 58,000 workers.
In major projects play a really important role in anchoring and driving expansion in the BC economy. Those major projects in play include the Site C Clean Energy Project, port expansion proposals in Prince Rupert and at the Roberts Bank Container Terminal, so-called T2 project in the Lower Mainland. There's, of course, energy projects have been in the news, Pacific Northwest LNG proposal, the Trans Mountain Pipeline expansion, and then transit proposals like the Massey Tunnel replacement and the Evergreen Line in the city of Vancouver, between Coquitlam and Vancouver. Now, with that sort of economic context in mind, let me shift to talk about the performance of the BC economy. Our economy gained momentum significantly in 2015, posting 3.0% growth in real GDP, and that is forecast to lead all of the provinces both this year and next. That upswing is driven by a really surging residential real estate market, and that drives record-setting construction and renovation activity in the province, strong consumer spending, rising exports, that expanding tech sector that I mentioned earlier, a couple of really banner years in tourism, as well as shipbuilding under the National Shipbuilding Strategy. Our economy in BC has been relatively less affected overall by the decline in oil and gas prices compared to the other Western provinces. Our employment growth is forecasted to increase by 2.8% in 2016, and in fact, we've already seen 87,000 new jobs created in the year to date in BC. The unemployment rates in BC hover around 6% province-wide relative to a national rate of about 7%. But it's important to note that those job gains have been concentrated in the lower mainland and in southern Vancouver Island. It's a very different situation in the rest of the province where unemployment rates have crept up in recent years. That increase in exports that I mentioned is driven mostly by wood products lately, agriculture and agri-food products as well, and those have been partly offset by declines in natural gas and in metallurgical coal shipments. So notwithstanding that very relatively bright picture, BC's economic outlook does show some increasing risks. Household debt in Canada is at record levels of almost 170% of disposable income in 2015. That's well in excess of historical norms. And a recent study by my good friend Mr. Jock Finlayson at the BC Business Council estimated that the housing sector is actually responsible for somewhere between 35 and 40% of the recent economic growth in BC. So that 3% economic growth without the housing sector would be less than 2%. And that's a concentration of activity related to housing that presents a real risk. There's also real risks associated with the uncertainty relating to the expiry of the Canada-U.S. softwood lumber agreement, as well as the reductions in timber available to harvest due to the mountain pine beetle infestation. We have rising skilled worker shortages across the province in many sectors, and final investment decisions on some of those major energy projects remain pending. So let me point out a couple of key features that I think are important to distinguish BC from some of the other Western provinces. I like to point out to my colleagues continually that BC is different. In addition to being the least rectangular of the Western provinces, it is also, I would say, a bit more of a patchwork than other places in the West. So we're fragmented geographically, obviously, by mountains and rivers. There's 7 very different economic development regions within the province. And then when it comes to Metro Vancouver region, some of you might know, Metro Vancouver has 22 separate municipalities. And of course, BC is home to 203 First Nations bands, which is about a third of the national total. Il y a aussi quelques autres traits particuliers.
There are another couple of specificities of British Columbia that makes it such an interesting place to work, I think, given its economic position in Canada. It's really a gateway to the Pacific, and this leads to it playing an important role for Canada. Forestry remains a real pillar of economic prosperity for many of the rural communities. Vancouver has the reputation of being one of the most Asian areas and cities outside of Asia. It's also our province has the least number of treaties finally concluded with the First Nations. Let me now tell you a little bit about our department, Western Economic Diversification Canada, in our province. We are actively involved in applying a number of the last federal budget items. We've recently finished studying some 400 requests received for cultural and economic Canadian projects 2015. We're also working closely with other regional development agencies to double our joint investments in clean technology under a 2016 federal budget commitment to increase spending on clean tech to $100 million annually. And we are supporting federal work aimed at engaging Canadians in consultations to define Canada's innovation agenda.
Delivering on our core departmental funding and policy responsibilities against our 4 departmental priorities of innovation, trade and investment, Indigenous economic growth, and defense procurement. Our core funding, that core funding also supports our Western Innovation Program, or WIN, as well as a province-wide network of service delivery partners, including 34 Community Futures development corporations. We also serve as a delivery agent in support of some other federal initiatives. So we're participating, for example, in the Indigenous and Northern Affairs Department Strategic Partnerships Initiative that targets Indigenous participation in economic development. And then lastly, from time to time over the years, WD has taken on the delivery of some large federal programming, things like temporary adjustment programs or infrastructure initiatives. So going forward, some of the challenges we're responding to in BC, in innovation, there's a lack of capital that is constraining commercialization of new products and services. Our response, the WIN program, is well oversubscribed, meaning that we have to turn down quality projects in industries like clean tech, like life sciences, space, oceans, information and digital technologies. As well, we've got a real challenge in our traditional resource industries who are facing technological changes. We're trying to increase the linkages between innovative small and medium-sized enterprises, for example, in the clean tech sector, to help address some of those issues in the resource industries. In trade and investment, there's only 3% of businesses in BC that export at all, and amongst small and medium-sized enterprises, there's only 1.3% of BC's businesses that export. So we've got an opportunity there to help firms become more export-ready and position them to capitalize on opportunities presented by our international trade agreements. In terms of Indigenous economic growth, we know that capacity constraints limit participation of many First Nations in the economy. That leads to missed opportunities. We've worked successfully with First Nations to support skills development and entrepreneurial training in preparation, for example, in opportunities in resource development and energy, as well as shipbuilding. We've advanced clean energy projects in communities through the BC Indigenous Clean Energy Initiative. This is one of those projects that was financed through the Indigenous Northern Affairs SPI funding. And on that project, we're in the middle of going through those now in partnership with the New Relationship Trust, and we've received 51 applications for assistance under that program, including 14 from off-grid communities. But our budget there is only $4 million, so that's going to limit the extent to which we can respond to those opportunities. And lastly, in defense procurement, we play a role in trying to match small and medium-sized enterprises in the West and in BC with the prime contractors under Canada's Industrial and Technological Benefits Program. And we help position those SMEs as suppliers to those prime contractors through events like our Western Innovation Forum that is coming up this November in Vancouver. En conclusion, j'aimerais...
So in closing, I would like to thank the committee for letting me brag a bit about these great things in BC, and I will be glad to answer any questions that you have for me today. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you for spelling it out as it is, both what you do and some of the points that may not be so wonderful. We appreciate that. I'm sitting here and wondering, with all those things going on, what do you do with your spare time? Mr. McKinnon, 5 minutes.
Effectivement, merci d'être là.
Yes, indeed. Thank you for having joined us today, gentlemen, and congratulations on the quality of your French. I'm sure that the Francophones in BC certainly appreciate that.
No, this committee has taken an interest and will take up the issue of housing in the not-too-distant future. And the provincial government has obviously taken measures to, I think it would be fair to describe it as to cool off the housing sector. That will have run-on effects in the rest of the economy. How do you evaluate those, and how do you keep British Columbia growing in the context of, deliberately trying to cool off a housing sector?
Thanks very much for the question. It's as you correctly identified, it's one of the major issues facing BC right now. I should probably start by saying I've lived in British Columbia for 8 years, and you're looking at an 8-time loser in the British Columbia housing market. Each one of those 8 years would have been a really good time to buy a house, and I haven't. So you should probably take what I have to say then with a bit of a grain of salt. As I said, it is a real risk to the economy, and it's not just the sort of direct impacts on home sales and construction. The run-up in housing prices has had a number of other really important effects. For example, house renovations now actually outpace new home construction in terms of contribution to BC. That's at risk. The wealth effects that are associated with a run-up in housing prices would also be at risk. So the wealth effects are when your house is, as is the case for many people people I know in BC, worth 3 times what you paid for it, you feel a lot wealthier, and you're likely to decide to go to Cactus Club rather than Tim Hortons. Your house prices come down, and that's going to unwind seriously. It's those kind of effects that were behind that estimate I said about like more than 1/3 of recent economic growth is at risk. The measures that have been taken to cool off the BC housing market, honestly, it's too early to say whether those have had an effect or not. House sales, the volume of sales in BC was dropping before the recent the tax on foreign property transfers was put in place. It may accelerate that trend. It'll actually be it'll be difficult to say. And of course, the mayor of Vancouver has been talking up the idea of a vacant home tax that would have could have much the same effect. But I will say this as well, that the business community is starting to view the run-up in housing prices as a serious break or a serious mitigating factor in the overall investment climate in British Columbia. There's increasingly few places in the world from which Vancouver looks cheap. So places like Singapore, Hong Kong, LA are still, the housing still looks cheap, but that list is growing shorter. What WD's contribution is to this, people in BC now are faced with devoting something like 88% of their median incomes to home purchases, which is far in excess of even the next hottest housing market in Canada, which is Toronto. I mention that because the housing affordability problem has both a numerator and a denominator. It's house prices, yes, but it's also incomes. And BC has lower median incomes than the rest of the country. So the kinds of projects that we are working on, and things like the WIN initiative, which is aimed at increasing jobs in high-tech startup firms that have technology commercialization potentials, that sector pays well above median wages, as much as 40 to 60% above median wages. So when we succeed, when the companies that we fund succeed, we're contributing to the denominator of that housing price problem.
When I think of British Columbia, I also think, as you have alluded to, clearly some major energy infrastructure projects and possibility of obviously pipeline and LNG development. But I also think of downward pressure on things like coal production. I just wondering about your thoughts in a world where we're looking for growth and innovation, how you plan around on diversification around, the eventuality possibly of energy development on one level, and then the probability of decline, if you will, in things like coal production.
If I may, on the latter, on the decline in coal production, it is palpable how it's affected the economy in BC. Not only the direct extraction activities of companies like Teck Resources. Teck is one of the biggest mining companies in Canada, and they've had to cut shifts at many of their mines, if not most of their mines, over the last couple of years. So it's had a really direct impact in the regions of the province where there's the extraction activity take place at their mine sites. It's also had a direct impact on activity at the Port of Vancouver, which is Canada's largest port and the second largest port on the west coast of North America. It's a real job generator, and coal shipment volumes are down quite sharply at the Port of Vancouver. So it has a fairly profound impact. One of the things that we're engaged in right now is a bit of a dialogue with some of the mining companies over the extent to which they are able to introduce small and medium-sized enterprises into their supply chains. So that's one of the ways. So even in a declining price environment, sometimes even more in a declining price environment, a company like Teck and others, Goldcorp, they have a real incentive to become more efficient. And the small and medium-sized enterprises that contribute to that high technology sector in BC can be really positive contributors to innovation in mining. Now, it's not true, as I think people sometimes criticize the mining sector for, that they're not innovative and risk-taking. They're extremely risk-taking. When you open a mine, you're making a bet that that you're going to spend hundreds of millions of dollars usually on something that isn't going to produce a dime of revenue for usually 10 years. So these are some really, they're used to taking risk. Problem is when the risks associated with innovation come on top of that basic risk that they face. And so we've engaged in a series of dialogues with some of Canada's major mining companies about what kind of barriers and obstacles small businesses face in accessing those supply chains, and things that we could do to perhaps change some of the policies and programs that we have in place to better address that and to better get them into a position where the private sector will actually take on the role of demand for innovation. So around the energy projects, as I pointed out, there's
I'll have to cut you there. And if you can bring it in later, Mr. Obutef.
Well, thank you very much for the detailed presentation on BC economy. Is very informative. And you represent about 10% plus of the Canadian economy, same on the population. You've got a third of the Canadian Indigenous community. You've got most of the Canadian use tidewater. You've got the resources, you've got the diversity of different economic spectrums, and you only 3% of BC businesses are engaged in export. That is really concerning. What is stopping you from improving that sector, and what else can BC do in order to boost that sector?
On the small business participation in exports, one of the things we have actually fairly recently re-engaged with, and that's with the province of British Columbia. The Ministry of International Trade and ourselves and Global Affairs Canada's regional office in British Columbia participate in a sort of regional trade network where we try to maximize each other's contributions to things like export missions abroad. It's really difficult to coordinate federal and provincial, and in some cases even municipal activities in terms of a calendar sense, but at least in terms of where we're putting our emphasis, which sectors we're putting our emphasis. So that committee is a bit of a coordination mechanism for those export missions. We also have, of course, through the network of what we call our Western Canada Business Service Network, which includes the Small Business BC, an organization that's jointly funded by ourselves and the province of British Columbia, as well as through our Community Futures Development Corporations. There are 34 of them across the West. There's an avenue there where we can help small businesses become more export ready. There's an awful lot of businesses that just don't consider export markets. And I'm a former businessman from many, many years ago in a business where it was absolutely natural, in computer software, where it's absolutely natural to consider your market as the world. But many businesses don't operate that way, and as particularly businesses that are located outside the Lower Mainland and the Southern Vancouver Island area. So I think there's actually quite a bit more that could be done in terms of export readiness for small businesses. And that's a role that we at WD could play. The extent to which we play it now, honestly, is pretty constrained by the amount of funding that we can devote to things like trade and investment programs.
On this topic, two things. First of all, what's your target from 3%? What is your target either by dollar or by engagement, business engagement on individual small businesses? And how much the major projects are going to play in that fashion without having to politicize the pipelines going through BC and going to the Tidewater?
I may ask my colleague here if we can dig out from our rather impressive binder of information here, as you can see I brought with me, some of the targets that we have in our report on plans and priorities for our trade and investment activity. Sorry, Martin, putting you on the spot, but so we have targets associated with that element of our departmental framework. But when it comes to that, that 3%, we haven't adopted a target of increasing the proportion of industries that do export. That actually is something that we might be well advised to take under consideration. It is one of the biggest problems in increasing exports in BC. So no specific target on that, although we do have some targets associated with that whole area of trade and investment that might be close at hand in our RPP.
Question here. You've been, attracting real estate investment into Vancouver and Lower Mainland is not a surprise. Okay, and I guess you mentioned some of those reasons why. Now, will there be any policies that would help those people who invest in real estate to invest in businesses and help the business? And could policies play a fundamental role in that fashion? And have we missed the boat yet?
In fact, we have a project underway which is jointly funded with WD, the province of British Columbia, and the BC Business Council. It goes by the name of HQ Vancouver, so Headquarters Vancouver. And it's aimed precisely at increasing the attraction to the Lower Mainland of headquarters offices of companies, mostly Asian companies. There's already a pretty good track record of companies that have been attracted by this initiative. But one of the things we found when we started, this is kind of interesting, it speaks right to your point. One of the things we found when we started out this HQ Vancouver initiative is that one of the best sources for increased investment is Asian, wealthy Asian individuals who are already resident in the Lower Mainland. In many cases, these are individuals who bought real estate and haven't actually invested in the local economy. So this is an initiative that would directly address, as I said, both the numerator and the denominator of that housing affordability equation by getting wealthy Asian residents of the Lower Mainland to consider locating businesses in BC. There's an avenue there which we found to be quite fruitful. So I would say as many as half of the headquarters that have been attracted to BC under this initiative have actually been of that sort. It's been via individuals that are resident already.
We'll turn to Mr. Crown. I wonder, did you find that number on targets? If you could let us have that first.
Yeah, we're looking at WD from all four regions, but we're looking at 509 SMEs that pursue a new trade opportunity as a result of global advisory services.
Okay, Mr. Caron.
Merci beaucoup. Merci pour votre présence.
Thank you very much. Thank you for being here this afternoon. There is something that struck me in your presentation because it's different from the other presentations that we have heard. It is not negative, of course, necessarily. You spoke about the operational priorities in the four areas: innovation, investment, trade, commerce, and economic growth for Indigenous peoples, and federal defense procurement. It's an industrial sector that's very precise. Normally, we hear talk about innovation, exports, and so on, but not always about priorities attached to specific industries. How far back does this go? And why is this? What is the date on which you started thinking that way, and how does that affect areas of BC? This is much more specific than other presentations we have heard in terms of industry. I will ask my colleague here to look in his very big collection of information that he has on the desk. Our role here goes back years. And it's really a role that we see as setting out opportunities that are linked to major procurement in industry in Canada and also to small and medium-sized businesses. We've done so for many years. I can tell you frankly that our efforts in this direction have really increased since 2013 with the arrival of Mr. Meddings in our department. That's when, and in fact, it's his area of responsibility in industry. But it's not just simply the defense industry. We look at major procurement in general, but principally it is in the area of defense where industrial and technological benefit procedures apply. And so that has become more specific for this industry. There is enormous opportunity there. And according to what has been done in this policy, various businesses have been able to progress. There is a certain sum of money that is attached to a contract, and small and medium-sized businesses who aren't necessarily normally in the best position to be able to contact major companies like Lockheed Martin have benefited from it. Well, is this something that is peculiar to you? It's being done. Is it being done elsewhere in the Atlantic or in Quebec? Yes, but it's the first time that we've seen that in the Pacific area, and that's why it sort of struck me when I was listening to you. Now, there's an element that's been rather far from the economic concern of many, and I'm referring to the forestry industry, because there is also the processing industry that is attached to it. Export markets have become very important, even exceeding local processing. Have you thought about this issue, and how do you intend to help affected communities? Because in the north of British Columbia, certainly, I know that has caused extreme damage, and has been a great problem economically. There have been no solutions to the problem. So what can be done? How can you link processing to opportunity at the level of the lumber industry? You have put your finger on a very clear problem for British Columbia and also for other provinces and for the future. If you allow me, I will answer the rest of the question in English because I have more vocabulary in terms of softwood lumber in English than French.
In Canada, I've had my share of softwood lumber losses in the past. In fact, just this morning, I met with one of my colleagues at the Global Affairs Canada, who's responsible for the softwood lumber file. And it's fair to say that the way things are headed now, the expiry of the softwood lumber agreement is likely to lead to another round of countervailing and anti-dumping duties. That will have an impact on the forest sector, which will come on top of the impact of the mountain pine beetle infestation. So if you overlay those two things in British Columbia, you got some pretty serious impact for a lot of communities in the north. My colleague Martin was just recently in Quesnel, BC, which is one of the communities that is really heavily forest dependent. And he was there as a federal representative to a provincial government effort to help the community of Quesnel adapt and think about opportunities that they're going to have as a community going forward, given the severe impact already of the decline in availability of fiber supply, as they call it. The average allowable cut, or AAC, in the province will be declining drastically in that region. And so the products that they're able to export and the jobs associated with that are really at risk. And the situation with the softwood lumber agreement will only come on top of that. It's worth noting that in the past, the federal government has allotted some serious consideration and resources to something called the Softwood Lumber Community Adjustment Initiative, and WD was given responsibility for administering that initiative. So it's at least conceivable that we'll be in that. Unfortunately, it's at least conceivable that we'll be in that same situation with the likely initiation of trade remedy actions in the United States over the next few months or next few weeks and months.
Thank you. I'll have to stop you there, but just to clarify on that point, but there is not in place at the moment a softwood lumber community investment initiative, right? It is a program that was in place in the past. I mean, we should know that.
That is correct, sir.
That's not, you cannot do that under regular WD programming.
No.
It would have to be a new government initiative, overall government. Okay, that's good for us to know. Mr. Sabera.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Welcome. I do want to personalize this for a minute, and apologies to my colleagues. I'm a British Columbian transplanted in Ontario, and I always get the question is, why would you want to leave Vancouver to come to Ontario? But for the scenery, of course. But I love, obviously, the riding of Vaughan, where I live and where I'm raising my family. I was raised in Prince Rupert, so there's some comments here to Pacific LNG and the port proposal. I have a lot of high school friends that work at the coal port and at the grain elevator and so forth, and focusing away from the Lower Mainland, because the Lower Mainland is doing quite well. I'd like to, if you can provide some color. Growing up in Prince Rupert, there's a very diverse, very rich Indigenous population that I'm very connected with still, a lot of good friends. And I wanted to see what programs or what initiatives have you done to work with the Indigenous community, Aboriginal community, outside of the Lower Mainland, in those areas in Prince Rupert, Terrace, Smithers, Northeast BC, that is making a difference, because there is a skill shortage in BC, but you have a very young Aboriginal population there that needs to be involved in the job market and to be provide those skills and training that I think would make a huge difference for the economy.
Thank you for that. As part of my job, one of the finest parts of my job is I get the opportunity to visit places like Prince Rupert. So I understand your attachment to the area. You're correct that there's a lot of activity and a lot of hope in Prince Rupert surrounding the things like the Pacific Northwest natural gas project. The expansion of the port is, as I noted, one of those. The expansion of the Fairview Container Terminal is one of those really significant developments on the horizon for Prince Rupert. WD was actually involved in delivering the federal government's contribution towards the establishment of the Fairview Container Terminal. This was just before my time at WD, but there was some $30 million contributed by the federal government via WD. And one of the things that we had to do in connection with that was secure the agreement of the local First Nations, who, as you know, were not all united on the expansion of the Fairview Container Terminal. It impacted different First Nations communities differently, and it is an area as well of overlapping land claims, so it complicates and that's common throughout British Columbia, frankly. But the five major First Nations organizations, bands represented around the Prince Rupert area, all had different views on Fairview, and it was a complex and difficult process to get them to the point where the benefits associated with that project were enough to offset some of the concerns. And that's the calculus for a lot of First Nations communities, right? It's the economic benefits associated with these communities. Yes, First Nations communities, most of them are deeply interested in economic development, but it has to be done in a way that's environmentally sustainable and respects their traditional practices and cultures in their communities. And so there's been quite a bit of work already done in association with the Pacific Northwest project. And it's not one that we're directly involved in at this point. It's other government agencies that are involved in it. But I know from my participation in interdepartmental meetings in BC, for example, that they're working hard on addressing the concerns of First Nations associated with that. I did have another answer to your what we've done for Aboriginal youth. We have funded a whole variety of mobile trades training trailers, one of which we did with Northwest Community College. And the idea of that is to bring some of the training opportunities directly into First Nations communities. Because for some of these youth, moving out of their community, even out of a small community and going to a place like Smithers or Terrace is a really big dislocation. And so if you can bring some of the training to them, you stand a better chance of them actually really getting involved in the economy.
And actually, if I can just ask a quick follow-up, the fishing industry on the North Coast and along the entire coast really has witnessed a large downsizing over the last decades. Are there retraining programs that you've provided in that? Is that part of your mandate, not part of your mandate? When I say that, there was a large cannery in Prince Rupert that closed down. I think there was a few hundred jobs that were lost 2 or 3 years ago. And I always thought to myself, those workers need to retrain, get the skills that they need to succeed. Is that part and parcel part of your mandate? And excuse my ignorance if it is, and I don't know. But it's something that's important. It's something to get those workers, either if they need to relocate, but need the skill set in order even to do so.
The actual providing of training opportunity is not within WD's mandate. That's really Employment and Skills Development Canada. But we work quite closely with them, and we're trying to get to a point where we can work even more closely with them, because their funding actually provides training spots. The expression, excuse the committee, is bums and seats. But that's what they have funding, and quite a lot of it, for what's called the Aboriginal Skills Enhancement assets anyway. So Tricorp is the organization that provides that training with funding from ESDC in the Northwest. Our role is actually to do things that ESDC can't do, and that's things like provide capital equipment for things like mobile trade training. So we have we've managed to, within our budget on several occasions, come up with mobile skills trade training options around the province, actually, that serve that initiative. In fact, my last meeting just before coming to the committee was with a committee of provincial government assistant deputy ministers on labour market priorities, and it's exactly that sort of opportunity. They're looking to collaborate with us.
Thank you.
Thank you for that.
Sorry, Francisco,
No,
you are a minute over. Going to Mr. McColman.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for being here. We really want to drill down into the risk factors, because we're doing pre-budget consultations, this committee, and what will result from the pre-budget consultations is our recommendations as a committee to the minister looking forward. So let's look forward. What we know is the likelihood of a softwood lumber agreement is 0 to 0. So there's going to be major adjustment in that sector in your economy. That's layered on, as you have said, the reductions in timber available to be able to harvest. What I would call, from being a builder my whole life, a distorted market condition in Vancouver that is heard many analysts describe how it's come to be that way, but it is that way. We're looking at household debt above the national average. I guess what I'm saying is I'm painting a bit of a gloomy picture here. Perhaps one of the light at the end of the tunnel would be that the 2 pipeline projects that are part of consideration of this government would be ones that would see favorable approval, and that could offset some of the downside risk that you have accurately articulated, and I've just tried to repeat back to you as I understand it. What are your views in that larger picture, in particular the effects of pipelines should they be approved?
I should probably start with just one small point about the softwood lumber. My experience on this goes back quite a ways, and it's not entirely doom and gloom. The industry is a little better positioned in 2 important respects than it was, say, in 2001, the last time we faced countervailing and anti-dumping duty suits. And the most important thing is that back then there was almost no market in Asia. Now, the wood products industry overall exports about a third of its exports go to Asia, and that will be a mitigating factor when it comes to the impact of a U.S. countervailing or anti-dumping suit.
Good.
Some of the companies, the firms involved in Canada, have also made significant investments in the U.S. So outfits like companies like Canfor and Interwest and West Fraser, not Interfor and West Fraser, have made investments in the U.S. So to sort of buffer their corporate sort of experience. On the 2 pipeline projects, it's of course not WD's role in the government apparatus to have any impact on that.
I don't want to make it political.
Yeah.
I'm giving you the hypothetical because you mentioned them in your remarks. You put them in your presentation as potential risks and articulate them that way. So I've asked this actually of every regional organization that's come before us on these last few days. I won't give you exactly what they've said. If you look at testimony, you'll find out. But what would it mean to British Columbia in terms of pure economics? Take the politics out of it. Pure economics, that's what we're asking you. That's what you do. You do economic analysis, and you make decisions for the budgets you get. What would the effect be?
I think you heard from my colleague Jim Saunderson, my Alberta colleague, on this question of potential oil price declines and oil price impacts. Essentially, the biggest impact for the country as a whole would be a decline in the spread that oil exported from Alberta faces relative to a world benchmark. So there's right now a pretty large spread, although it's smaller than it used to be. And a pipeline to Tidewater in either direction would have a pretty major impact on shrinking that spread. So the value of exports would go up, even without a volume increase in exports, quite considerably. And that would translate into a major economic benefit for Canada's GNP as a whole. Right? In addition, the construction of a pipeline would have some pretty major economic impacts for communities all along the route. Pipeline infrastructure is what we call linear infrastructure, and linear infrastructure has because it's a point-to-point affair, has an impact on a great many people along the way. So one of the areas where we have focused some effort is on the potential opportunities for First Nations communities associated with pipeline projects and other major energy projects. So as I mentioned in my remarks, there's some capacity constraints that sometimes block communities' ability to access those opportunities. Am I being... No,
I'm just waving at Phil. He's done. You're not quite.
I'm not quite there. Okay. So we've done some work. We've done some work in cooperation with the province of British Columbia and with other federal government departments on establishing a sort of an inventory, a workable inventory of business development programs, so that Aboriginals entrepreneurs with businesses, often they're unincorporated businesses, but in order to do business with a major corporation that's building a pipeline, you're better off to be incorporated. So just explaining some of the basics of business development can often be a contributor to unblocking some of that capacity in First Nations communities.
Thank you both. We'll go to 4 minutes so we can get both Ms. O'Connell and Ms. Ray done. Go ahead, Jen.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Thank you for your presentation. We've actually heard quite a lot about diversification and clean energy. And we kind of have had conversations too in the sense of it seems like everybody is looking to be the leader in this area of clean tech, clean energy. What makes you stand out? What is going to be the factor in this competitive model, not only in Canada, but around the world? Or are you positioning yourselves, might be a better way of asking it, to really be a leader in that regard?
Thanks for the question. You're right. Everybody's positioning themselves to be a leader in this area. So you're going to hear from me very much what you've heard from others, but I'm going to back it up with some really hard facts. Not that some of my colleagues necessarily haven't done that. But data on clean tech, I'm talking clean tech generally, but clean energy as well. Data on clean tech is actually kind of hard to come by. It's not a sector in Stats Canada's in the national accounts. But there has been some work, there is some work underway right now, which we are participating in at WD interdepartmentally. But the best data source we have now is a report that showed 40% of the clean tech companies in Canada are in Western Canada. 25% of them are in British Columbia. So the economic geography of British Columbia is highly favorable towards clean technology. Our wind program, which is not targeted to a particular sector, the first three intakes of wind have been open to any sector that has technology commercialization potential. Over half of the money that we've ended up spending has gone to clean tech, not because we directed it there, but because that's where the opportunities lie. I got to tell you that in addition to being able to visit Prince Rupert, one of the best parts of my job is in looking over these applications that we get in for the wind program from clean tech companies in particular. And when I see the entrepreneurial spirit and the smarts that are on display in Western Canada, it blows me away. Probably one of the best signs of that is clean tech projects that we haven't been able to fund. We funded quite a few that I'm quite proud of, but we've also not been able to fund clean tech projects that are, in my view, quite deserving of funding and have scored very highly in our assessment project in things like ore sorting, in things like new materials based on biomass, in things like landfill gas recapture and things like capturing waste from waste streams from agricultural activities. We've had a number of really fantastic applications in areas like that that we haven't been able to fund. So what we have funded is a good sign of why BC in particular and the West in general is a clean tech hotbed. What we haven't funded is also a really good sign.
Thank you. Just following up on that, so because we are in pre-budget consultations, would one of your asks then be further investment so you could fund, especially in the realm of clean tech and diversification in this regard?
Let me give you another hard statistical piece of evidence in support of that. So yes, you're absolutely right. That is an area where we would see a great deal of potential with additional resources. Under our WIN program, we are able to fund about 1 in 12 of the projects that we get in. Now, I'm not going to tell you that all 12 of those projects are worth funding. They're not. Some of the applications are actually not that strong. But I can tell you that if we were able to fund 1 in 6 of those applications instead, every single one of those additional projects would be strong projects, and particularly in clean tech. As I said, the economic geography of the West absolutely favors it. And it's partly due to the overwhelming presence of natural resource industries. Natural resource industries and the connection of small businesses to the large companies that extract natural resources is one of the best opportunities for making contributions to things like GHG reductions. Mining companies, after all, they would hate me for saying this, but most mining companies are really in the business of burning rocks. They burn rocks for a living. Rocks don't burn very well. They take a lot of fuel. So if you can find technologies that reduce the need for consumption of fossil fuels to smelt ores and to refine ores, you can make some really serious GHG reduction contributions.
Thank you, Ms. Raitt.
Sorry that I missed the first part of your presentation. I took the time to take a read of it, and I want to commend you on it. It's a very tight presentation. You give some good facts and figures. It's a good brief. So thank you for taking the time to put into it. I have some specific questions about some specific projects. You can give me an update. I'm curious about whether, there's no trick answers, by the way. These are just, I'm looking for the information. I don't know the information. I've lost track of some projects that I have a curiosity about. On the Roberts Bank T2, do you know what state we are in terms of moving forward? When last I left it, they were waiting for the government to allow them to change their borrowing limits, because I know that was an issue about them being able to secure investment, and that's what they wanted. So if you don't have it off the top of your head, I'm curious to know if they've been able to do that.
On the specific question of the increase in the borrowing limits for the Port Metro Vancouver,
yeah.
I'm sorry, I don't have that on the top of my head, although there were some changes made to the Canada Transportation Act some time ago to expand the financing capabilities of organizations like PNV.
That's true. They just needed it to be done again in order to take into consideration T2.
I think that would be the responsibility of my colleagues in either the Treasury Board or the Department of Finance. So
true.
Used to be my job many years ago, by the way.
Well, it becomes your problem when they ask you for your money. So I want to know if they've asked you for your money yet, because they can't. If they haven't asked you for WED money, then that means they're not moving ahead quite quickly.
They haven't asked us for WD money for this particular project. The T2 expansion is of a scale that's far beyond WD's resources, frankly, so they probably wouldn't come to us for the project. I have some information on it, but it's a huge expansion. Like we're talking about and so it's well beyond our resources. We have assisted projects at the Port of Metro Vancouver in the past, things like the electrification of cruise ships, shore power they call it. We've assisted that in the past.
Yeah, no, you just mentioned it in your brief, so I thought perhaps you had a deal in on it. On trade and investment, I'm really surprised that only 3% of businesses, I'm surprised that 3% of businesses in BC export. I find that to be a surprisingly low number, and I'm wondering what have you suggested is a good way to help firms to become export ready? And do you think that the Trans-Pacific Partnership would be something that would be beneficial to firms in BC?
All of our trade agreements, I think, in particular the TPP, would open up opportunities in the Asia-Pacific region that are not necessarily there now. And the free trade agreement with South Korea, which was concluded recently, has had just exactly that effect, BC being located on the Pacific Rim. So there are plenty of companies in BC that have availed themselves of the new opportunities under the Canada-Korea free trade agreement. I think that export, I referred in my remarks earlier in answer to one question that one of the ways of addressing that low number of companies that export in BC, and it's even smaller for small and medium-sized enterprises, like less than 1.5% of companies that export, is to come up with a coordinated suite of export readiness services, and it's something that we're actually thinking about and working on with the province of British Columbia through this regional trade network. The Ministry of International Trade in the province is quite open to collaboration with the federal government. So ourselves and my colleagues at Global Affairs Canada are actively engaged with them in trying to come up with some ideas to do this in a coordinated fashion so that different levels of government are not tripping over one another. When you're talking about presence in foreign markets, for example, nothing confuses them more than saying, oh, well, I'm the federal government, and that's a provincial issue. Like, the people in foreign markets don't get that.
Yeah. Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much. Just a quick question. In your brief, you talked about the lack of capital is constraining commercialization of new products. That is something we hear everywhere, that the lack of the Canadians' lack of ability, it seems, to be able to commercialize in many instances. There's not a bottomless pit of money, but you are saying here that you're oversubscribed, so more money would make a difference. But is there anything beyond more money that could help in that regard, whether it's collaboration with other federal departments or with provinces or whatever? Is there other things we can do in that area to get better commercialization and assist in innovation?
As you correctly identified, we are heavily oversubscribed, so more money would definitely make a very big difference to that technology commercialization effort. The coordination of some of our efforts with those of other agencies involved, we could probably do a better job, frankly. One of the benefits of WD working inside the broader innovation, science, and economic development portfolio is that we are doing exactly that. We're starting to do a better job of coordinating with agencies like the Business Development Bank, some of the other RDAs, to that end, to try and get a better bang for the buck, as it is. Also, with the province of British Columbia, the province has devoted $100 million to a venture capital fund. That fund will be operating on a sort of fund-to-funds basis. So to support innovative companies in BC, we could probably do a better job of aligning up some of our efforts to make sure that they're complementary to that. We also work pretty closely in consultations and in other fora with the venture capital industry in British Columbia. It is actually recently restored to a fairly dynamic state. VC in BC is healthier than it was about venture capital in BC, too many acronyms there, is healthier than it was about 5 years ago. We also have a really strong network of angel investors in British Columbia. These angel investors are, of course, like individual investors that support individual companies. We actually work pretty closely with them. One of the other areas, it's either first or second in most tech sector conversations. So the consultations that the government has been running on the innovation agenda recently have produced as either first or second an emphasis on talent attraction and talent retention. The tech sector in BC has deficits, not so much, believe it or not, in science, technology, engineering, and math. Canada does actually a pretty good job of producing graduates, skilled ones, in those areas. But where we need probably more flexibility is in the attraction of marketing, management, C-suite sort of talent to tech companies. Tech companies can grow to a certain point of 10, 20, 30 employees with the original founder involved. The original founder often is not a guy who's got the necessary skills to take a company to the 50, 100, and 500 employee stage. At that point, you need serious professional managerial talent, and a lot of that comes from Silicon Valley, let's face it. We had in Vancouver just recently a conference called the Cascadia Conference that was jointly sponsored by the BC Business Council and Microsoft Corporation. Microsoft has opened offices in BC, which, if anyone gets a chance to visit them, are absolutely stunning. In the course of that conversation, a company like Microsoft sees real potential in Vancouver, in the Lower Mainland in particular, but the attraction of talent is something that needs to be done with a little more flexibility. That said, we did hear from the Minister Baines did hear from the board members of Microsoft that what Canada has already done in the way of flexibility around immigration of talented individuals is actually a world-leading example. Microsoft is obviously operating in countries all over the world. They wish more countries had a system that's as flexible as ours, but there's clearly more to be done.
Okay, we will have to cut you there, and thank you very much for your presentation and your openness in answering questions. So we will turn next to ACOA, Newfoundland and Labrador. We'll suspend for 3 or 4 minutes while we change witnesses. Thank you very much, and welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
convene. I never heard it so quiet. Must be day 3. Before the committee now, we have the Atlantic Canada Opportunities Agency, Ken Martin, who's the Vice President for the Newfoundland and Labrador region, and Karen Skinner, who's the Director General of Regional Operations, Newfoundland and Labrador as well. So welcome to you both. I understand you have a presentation, and then we'll go to questions.
Great. Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It's both an honor and a privilege for both Karen and I to be here today, our first appearance before a parliamentary committee, so I'll say we're looking forward to it, but I know you wouldn't believe me. Thank you for the opportunity to appear before you today. As I mentioned, I'm joined by Karen Skinner, Ms. Karen Skinner, Director General Regional Operations with ACOA Newfoundland and Labrador. Newfoundland and Labrador is a vast land with a small population, just over 500,000 people, whose settlement patterns reflect a reliance on the fishery, but also on mining and forestry. The collapse of the cod fishery in 1992 marked a turning point in the province, creating record unemployment and a dramatic population decrease. But first oil in 1997 marked the start of an economic turnaround. Oil prices reached record highs, unemployment decreased, the population stabilized, and gross domestic product grew. The province enjoyed record budget surpluses, losing its have-not status by 2008. Now, following the boom-bust cycle typical of resource-dependent economies, the province is now being impacted by the downturn in oil and other commodity prices. Where oil once represented nearly 1/3 of provincial revenues, it now stands at 9%. This affects incomes, business investment, and the province's fiscal capacity. While the short to medium-term economic outlook appears challenging, long-term potential, particularly in the energy sector, remains strong. While the agency's mandate has always been to create better and more employment in Atlantic Canada, its programs have evolved to address specific challenges and realities. And with the Atlantic Growth Strategy, ACOA is committed to supporting a federal-provincial, homegrown, prosperity-focused and evidence-based strategy to stimulate economic growth. ACOA's work reflects the government's innovation agenda, including support for high-growth and clean-tech firms, as well as international business development. This alignment is reflected in strategic sectors like our information and ocean technology, energy, mining, fisheries, aquaculture, and tourism. Just to look at a few of these, Newfoundland and Labrador's ICT sector is mature with approximately 130 companies, 3,500 employees, and annual revenues in excess of $1.6 billion. I mentioned earlier Newfoundland and Labrador's historic reliance on the sea. And while many residents have left their boats, they never left the water. Centuries of experience and expertise in harsh marine environments is now advancing the ocean technology, or OT sector as we call it, in several marine-related subsectors, including oil and gas, defense and security, fisheries and aquaculture, and marine transport in areas such as weather forecasting, ice management, and ocean observation. There are over 1,700 direct employees in the OT sector, which generates about $528 million in annual revenues and more than $30 million in public and private sector R&D expenditures. ACOA recently invested just over $3 million to develop the Fishery and Marine Institute of Memorial University of Newfoundland's $19 million Holyrood Marine Base, a rural facility that will allow the Institute to consolidate at-sea operations and R&D in one location. A spin-off is the town of Holyrood's work to diversify its economy and capitalize on growing OT activity. Once a community reliant on the fishery, Holyrood is positioning itself as a place to conduct oceans-related business. The province's energy activities focus on offshore oil and hydroelectricity. Since 1997, the oil industry has contributed about $9 billion, or 28% annually, to nominal GDP and provided direct employment to approximately 9,200 people, including support workers. The province has 3 major offshore projects, with a 4th under construction, and despite price uncertainty, exploration is increasing. The future of offshore oil development is dependent on several factors: exploration attraction, competitiveness with other jurisdictions for project development, and innovation, particularly in developing technology for Arctic and harsh marine environments. To help ensure that long-term, sustainable, and local economic benefits are achieved from the energy sector, ACOA engages in a wide range of activities, including policy development and advocacy, strengthening supply and service capacity, and investing in R&D. Newfoundland and Labrador's traditional fishery and growing aquaculture sector continue to be relevant and important. In 2015, the total value of production in the seafood industry reached a record high, exceeding $1.2 billion, employing approximately 17,500 people in harvesting, processing, and aquaculture operations. ACOA's investment in fishery focuses on value-added processing and R&D to improve productivity. In aquaculture, the focus is on key publicly owned industrial infrastructure, training, and support for applied scientific research. I echo some of my colleagues from ACOA who appeared before me in their comments that ACOA's greatest strength lies in its on-the-ground presence and in-depth local knowledge. The agency benefits from solid government programming coupled with the flexibility to find solutions that deliver results. It has developed critical networks with provincial, municipal, academic, business, other federal and not-for-profit partners in order to focus on Government of Canada objectives. Many clients, particularly small business and community-based ones, tell us that while the dollar investments are important, it's more often our staff's time, counsel, and guidance that they value most. ACOA's employees across the agency are deeply passionate about the work they do, have a genuine concern for their clients and communities, and are committed to helping them succeed. So in closing, ACOA works with companies, communities, Aboriginal leaders, and institutions to help advance a strong and diversified economy and to help deliver on Government of Canada priorities. There are shared themes across the Atlantic region that shape ACOA's programs and services, but the ability to provide local context and knowledge allows us to deliver a nimble, responsive approach to address unique challenges, leverage strengths to build a more innovative and inclusive regional economy, and maximize opportunities in each of our four Atlantic provinces. So thank you again for your time today, Mr. Chair, and I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Martin. Just one added point, maybe with ACOA Newfoundland, because of the geography of the province, I understand you do have quite a number of we wouldn't call them regional offices, sub-office, I don't know what you call it.
Satellite office.
Satellite offices. How many do you have? Because I think they're scattered across the province due to geography.
Yes, that's right. We have a regional office in St. John's, and we have 6 satellite offices throughout the province, throughout both the island and Labrador.
Okay, thank you. Turning to Mr. Ouellette. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Thank you very much, Mr. Martin and Ms. Skinner, for coming out here today. I have a couple quick questions. I'm not going to be long. I was wondering if you could describe apart from the 150th anniversary projects, some of the other projects you're doing working with Indigenous communities and the number of them.
We have a long history of working closely with key Indigenous communities, the Innu, the Nunatsiavut, and Nunatuavut in Labrador, the Conn River Band, and the Halibut Band on the island of Newfoundland and Labrador. In fact, I've had the good fortune of having spent time about a year earlier in my career with ACOA actually working with a Nunatsiavut subsidiary to help them back in the days when Voisey's Bay was in its exploration stage. So we work with all of these groups and their members and beneficiaries in a number of key areas. Building business capacity is an important part of the work that we do with them, and that's to assist with business planning and mentoring. Supporting community business infrastructure, enabling infrastructure that enables Indigenous communities to take advantage of industrial development and business opportunities. And investing directly in businesses as well. So it's an approach that's very much hands-on, We've had also the good fortune of having strong business development activities occurring near some of our Aboriginal communities. Aquaculture development on the south coast of Newfoundland and Newfoundland and Labrador, Voisey's Bay and Lower Churchill happening in Labrador, and all of these are in close proximity to Aboriginal communities. So over the last 5 years, we've supported about 66 projects with Indigenous communities, totaling just short of $9 million. And as I say, we take a very hands-on approach in all three of those areas. It's interesting too, like I know I was out and visited the Conn River Band back a couple of months ago. I met with Chief Measle Joe, and when he referred to our field officer as our guy getting things done for us, it's heartening, and it's really good to hear. So we've really worked hard to build our relationship with our Aboriginal clients and our Aboriginal communities.
I was wondering how many of the jobs have been long-term? Apart from like a construction project where you build some infrastructure, do some renovations in the community, how many of the jobs are long-term jobs?
The bulk of the projects that we initiate or that we support, oftentimes they may be during a construction phase, but in most of those cases, the supply and service opportunities actually spill over into the operation phase. So many of these companies. A good example, Sukumiat Environmental has been directly involved in supporting some of the work around both Voisey's Bay and Lower Churchill. That company will continue to provide supply and support services, environmental services, to both of those major developments in Labrador.
Just a few final questions. There should be very short. How does your budget then for Indigenous peoples for Newfoundland compare to other ECOA budgets for Indigenous peoples?
I can't speak for the other regions, but I can tell you that in our case, we actually when we go through an operational planning process, we identify areas of intervention and activities and projects that we want to undertake with Indigenous communities. So those projects and initiatives will be built directly into our operational planning and by extension into our budgets.
Because the reason I asked that is there was I think a number of years ago, very few short years ago, there was an increase in the number of self-declared Indigenous peoples in Newfoundland, absolutely 1 in 5 almost at one point, then brought back down according to band membership. And I was wondering if that budget would have been increased at all compared to other provinces, if ECOA is handing out money on a per capita basis, but all of a sudden you see an increase in your Indigenous population, what type of impact that might have on you?
It wouldn't be on a per capita basis. It would really be opportunity driven, and that's based upon engagement and discussions and consultations that we would have with Indigenous clients. So some of those numbers creeping up or creeping down really would not have had any impact specifically on our budget, where we don't advance it on a per capita basis.
Thank you. Thank you both, Ms. Raitt.
Thank you very much. I appreciate you coming in. The reality is that you're the Economic Development Agency for Newfoundland and Labrador, and it's not really good there right now. The Premier himself has referred to it as a basket case. It's never been this bad. $2 billion deficit in the budget, looking at a $25 billion net debt for 527,000 people in one province. The last time this happened, you had to join Canada in order to erase the debt from World War I, so we can't go that route again. I mean, you guys are in a tough gig right now, doing economic development in a place that's just getting hammered by oil prices, and there's lots of difficulties. So I appreciate the bright spots you give us, but on the other side, what I'd like to understand, you put a lot in here on long term, and the long term is, you still say it's going to be about oil production. But I don't see policies that are going to be coming forward in the next couple of years that are going to be encouraging of that long-term growth in oil. So bearing all that in mind and noting the fact that you guys say in here that one of the activities you engage in is policy development and advocacy in the energy sector, tell me about what you think about a carbon price and what's that going to do to the revenues. And I would note for the record as well, like, this is shocking stuff, that at one point in time, oil revenues for the budget of Newfoundland and Labrador was a third of the revenues, and it's 9% right now. That's a drop that nobody can sustain. It doesn't matter how rich the province is or what they have around them. So talk to me a little bit about the difference between what you set out here as long-term has to be the return of oil and offshore development, and the notion of carbon pricing. What does that mean? And then the final part is there any glimmer of hope in the short term? Because we're really looking at long term here. And is there anything you can do through these programs day to day to help spur on economic development?
Well, I think there are bright spots in the short to medium term. Our tourism industry remains very strong. It's a billion-dollar industry. 500,000 visitors annually, 36% growth in non-resident visitation over the last 6 years. The aquaculture sector is strong as well and shows great promise, especially on the south coast. Our tech sector, and particularly our ocean technology sector, which I spoke about a little earlier, is strong as well. And oil, as I mentioned, shows promise in the long term too, especially in the Flemish Pass, where I expect our next field will be a field that Statoil are looking at developing with 300 to 600 million barrels, 300 to 600 million barrels. So I think there are quite a number of bright spots in the economy, notwithstanding some of the challenges that we face. I really can't offer an opinion on carbon pricing. It's really beyond my purview. But I do think that some of the areas where we are concentrating our efforts, areas where we have possibilities for growth and expansion, will help the economy in the short term, and eventually, I know it's a long to medium term possibility, but oil prices will eventually improve. Likely not nowhere near where they have been in the past, but will certainly improve.
Do you have a sense as to what out-migration looks like right now, or are you experiencing in-migration with people returning from Saskatchewan, Alberta, Manitoba, the places that are no longer up and running in terms of oil production?
That's a good question. The population has stabilized. We are pretty much stable at around, you mentioned 528,000. The economic slowdown, particularly related to oil prices, has had an impact on worker flow. For quite some time, we had somewhere in the order of how many thousands of people who were actually involved in the remittance economy?
About 20,000.
About 20,000 people who were commuting to and from primarily Alberta, but also on Ontario. Those were the two biggest areas. That number obviously has petered off. That hit a high in 2012. So we've seen a lot of those folks come back. And that has impacted rural areas more particularly, because many of those folks tend to be from rural areas of the province, skilled tradesmen. A lot of them are from the south coast. But that presents some opportunities as well. I know an overheated economy in Newfoundland over the last number of years has resulted in some skills shortages that we've experienced as well. And having some of those pool of skilled tradesmen available has helped with some of the larger industrial development projects that are still underway. Hebron development, completion of the Lower Churchill, and some other mining and aquaculture-related projects that are in the offing. So the population has stabilized, and as I say, I think we have seen a number of folks who are traveling to places like Alberta and Ontario return to the province.
We'll have to cut it there, but just to put in, you said 20,000 from Newfoundland. I'm not sure whether it's 23 or 25. There was 23 or 25 flights out of Moncton direct to Fort McMurray a week. Now there's 0.
Yeah.
So that's the kind of impact all over Atlantic Canada. Mr. Caron.
Merci beaucoup et merci pour votre présentation.
Thank you very much. Thank you for your presentation. In this presentation, you're not really specifying how Alcoa is. I think the translation is on number 3, Mr. Chair. Number 2, actually. Thank you. Number 1 or number 2? I believe it will be number 1. 2, very good. Thank you so much. So I will repeat what I just said. In this presentation, you haven't really told us what the difference is between Alcoa's work. Are you hearing me? Testing, testing. Is it working at this point? Are you hearing the interpreter?
No, don't.
Testing, testing. Testing, testing. Do you hear us now, sir? Testing, testing. Testing on another microphone, sir. Hello, hello.
Is it working? Can you hear? Are you on number 1? There's also the volume. Maybe your volume isn't up. Is it working or not? It's working now? All right.
Go ahead.
I'm happy to
Listen, you got 2 minutes gone.
Recommençons. On était supposé protéger le bilinguisme.
Go ahead.
To protect bilingualism, in your presentation, you didn't really speak about the difference between the work that's done by Alcoa on the island of Newfoundland versus what is done in Labrador. In answering Mr. Ouellette, you touched on it, but philosophically and more generally, how do you deal with what is going on in Labrador versus Newfoundland proper?
Thank you for the question. Newfoundland and Labrador is one province, but we have unique challenges and opportunities in each region of the province. What we tried to do in our program delivery is address, and our interventions is address the unique opportunities and challenges that each region of the province faces. So it's not so much that we have a specific Labrador-focused strategy and a rest of the province or an island strategy. It's really to look at opportunities and challenges that exist in each of our regions. Labrador has a substantial Aboriginal population, so a significant portion of our work in Labrador is focused on dealing with Indigenous communities, and our programming and our interventions will be tailored to specific opportunities and challenges that those communities face. So it's not, as I say, it's not so much about focusing on a Labrador and a Newfoundland strategy, but dealing with what specific challenges and opportunities exist in the various regions of the province.
Toujours en restant à Labrador.
Now, continuing to ask questions about Labrador, what would you have to say about Labrador and the Lower Churchill project for electricity? What are the prospects for the coming months and years with respect to your involvement in this file?
The Muskrat Falls project clearly has some challenges as it moves forward. I think it's widely known that first electricity will be delayed until 2019, 2020, and that the project is over budget. Alcoa's preoccupation and ACOA's involvement has been similar to the work that we do with other major industrial development projects, and that is to work with our small to medium-sized enterprise community, the supply and service community, to ensure that they have accurate and up-to-date information on tendering opportunities and supply and service opportunities. So as the project continues to proceed, we will continue to work with our small to medium-sized enterprise community and our Indigenous community to ensure that business opportunities related to the project are taken full advantage of.
Peut-être une dernière question. Je pense que j'ai pas le temps.
One last question. Do I have any time for it? Yes, thanks. I asked a question of your colleagues from the other Atlantic provinces. You mentioned, I said to you before the meeting that I went around the Atlantic, and many of the officials from ACOA said that there was a centralization. What was shared with me was this: the centralization is risking the following, that ACOA will eventually become an agency that responds to the priorities that are set by Ottawa, that come from on high in Ottawa, and will no longer respond to the regional needs. In view of the fact that the Minister of State for the agencies is no longer in place. I'd like to know if you've heard the same type of commentary and the same type of concern expressed. How do you see the role of ACOA given the structural changes that have been made?
Firstly, the agency remains the lead economic development agency for the Government of Canada in Atlantic Canada. We continue to operate under a separate act of Parliament, the ACOA Act. All of our programming remains intact and in place. So there really has not been any appreciable change from a client service point of view. I have not heard any specific concerns. I think, if anything, the opportunity to engage with our regional development agencies elsewhere in the country is enhanced through the portfolio approach, and we've already seen some evidence of that. Just as an example, the Accelerated Growth Service that's been initiated by Innovation, Science and Economic Development is an initiative that includes engagement of all of the regional development agencies, Export Development Canada, the Business Development Bank, and others. And I think the portfolio approach, what it has done is allowed us to strengthen the level of coordination that happens between the various agencies and departments in the portfolio, and ultimately be able to provide better service to our clients. And in the case of the Accelerated Growth Services program, better coordination and focus on bringing federal programming and federal intervention to bear on high growth companies, to ensure that we give them the best service and the best coordinated approach that we can.
Thank you, Guy. But just on that question, because I was going through some of the other ACOA presentations last night, and on that question related that Guy raised, what is the decision making within ACOA at the regional level now? Is there delegated authority under a certain amount of funding for a proposal to those within the region, or does every application, no matter how small or how big, have to go up the line to the federal minister under INAC?
In terms of delegations, we do have delegated authorities within the agency, from the regional level up to the president, our deputy, and the minister. We follow a process where we provide insight or information on projects under consideration for the Minister for direction. That process works, and it's very similar to process that have existed within the agency for some time now. That process works very smoothly. It has never been something that's created any kind of a delay in terms of affecting decisions. So my experience has been that the process works very well, and time frames or turnaround times, service standards that we've set for considering project evaluations, 75 days. We're meeting that target the vast majority of the time. So the process works very well.
That was my next question. On 75 days, 90% of the time, that's the standard? Is that calendar days or working days? If you're the person out there waiting for the flow of money, 75 days, 90% of the time is quite a while. It's calendar days, working days?
75 business days.
Okay, so that's a heck of a lot longer than 75 days. Yeah, I mean, the area that sorry, Steve, the area that I'll get a lot of questions on is we'll be called, is a COA ever going to make a decision? I get lots of those calls. And I guess my thing would be that it's not a criticism, but maybe a COA has to be more results orientated in a speedier fashion. And my own thought on it is that the regional vice president, or at least the president, should be able to make a decision on X number of dollars, whatever it might be, $100,000 application or whatever it might be. Then it's made at the regional level and reported up to the top. And if there's some serious mistakes made, well, you make a change in personnel. But so is there any level that you can make a decision at the regional level, or does everything have to go to the minister?
Well, we seek, as I say, we seek direction from the minister on all projects, but it has not been a significant contributor to time to complete an evaluation. Yeah. Most of our projects, in fact, all of our projects, we have to conduct due diligence, a business case analysis, an assessment of economic benefits, an assessment of need. We consult with other departments. Oftentimes that involves consulting with sector experts. We have to complete, we're required to complete an environmental assessment, and all of those steps take time. Some projects are very complex, others are very small and routine, and ones that are much more routine we can turn around quite a bit quicker.
Okay, thank you, Mr. McKinnon.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Chair.
Doing too badly for your first appearance? We don't bite. It's often said that for Newfoundland specifically, if not for Labrador, there are two Newfoundlands. You know, there's St. John's, an area, and then there's the rest of the province. Two very different economic realities. You alluded to it a bit in your opening statement. Do you adjust your, I wouldn't want to go as far as say adjust your behaviors, but you know, do you take account of this fact in delivering programming?
Absolutely, and you're right. I've heard that analogy used a number of times, that we do have two economies: the St. John's Census Metropolitan Area and the rest of the province. And yes, many of the interventions that we undertake are quite different. Many of the challenges that both regions face are quite different. In urban areas, like in St. John's, in the St. John's CMA, largely business, government, it's largely the business, government and retail hub of the province. MUN's largest campus, Memorial University of Newfoundland's largest campus, is located there. St. John's accounts for about 50% of the province's GDP. most of the offshore supply and service companies are located there, as are the operators. So it's a different reality and a different environment that many of our rural areas have to face and the challenges that they have to deal with. Rural Newfoundland, on the other hand, is pretty deeply rooted in industries such as the fishing, what I talked about previously, the fishing and mining sector, and of course tourism. Many of our larger industrial development projects actually happen in rural areas of the province. Voisey's Bay, Muskrat Falls, our offshore fabrication projects as well. So the fishery is clearly a sector that is primarily focused in rural areas of the province. Aquaculture is the same. So our interventions, our role will differ when we deal with the realities and the challenges and opportunities that rural areas face versus areas like St. John's. So yes, to answer your question, we will adjust, or we will tailor our interventions and our roles and responses specific to the economic challenges and opportunities that are unique to rural areas of the province versus the St. John's area.
We talk a lot about inequality and inequalities in this country, and don't always talk about inequality of opportunity related to geographic area. You know, unless you're sitting on top of a nickel mine, which is a sort of an accident of geological history. The fact is that there are very real differences from cities to rural areas in economic opportunity. That's true in your province. That's true in my province of Quebec. And I'm just wondering, from your perspective, where you see the bright spots, and you know, other than nickel mines, for example, and where we can be doing things that will help make those bright spots even brighter. You know, our challenge, I know I'm repetitive, and as is our chairman, is we got to find some growth in this economy, and we have to find it in regions that lack is the same kind of opportunities that we have in urban areas. So where in Newfoundland and Labrador are you seeing the bright spots?
Well, I talked a little bit about it earlier. Our aquaculture sector shows significant promise, especially salmon aquaculture on the south coast. We have two major operators in that region right now that are salmon producers. We have a third.
Just out of curiosity, are they multinationals or are they local?
They're Canadian-based, but both operate internationally.
Okay.
We have a third company that has shown quite a bit of interest, a Norwegian-based company that both the province and the government of Canada have been talking with around the possibility that we'll see significant investment. This is obviously a work in progress, but I think it underlines the strength of the aquaculture sector. Tourism is growing, is certainly a sector that is growing for Newfoundland and Labrador, as I mentioned. What Newfoundland has to offer, Mr. Caron mentioned that he was in Newfoundland and Labrador recently, but I think it's the experiential, cultural, coastal vista offering that appeals to a kind of a savvy tourism clientele. And I think that's an important sector for us now, and one, as I mentioned, that we've already seen quite a bit of growth in the last 5 to 6 years. So I think that sector offers significant promise. I talked a little bit about the ocean technology sector in my opening remarks. Ocean technology offers significant promise, not only in terms of supporting oil and gas development as we move further offshore into deeper water and into fields that are located very much further offshore, and some of the challenges that they present, but many of the skills and many of the technologies that are developed to service operating in a harsh marine environment are equally applicable to undertaking and exploiting economic development opportunities in the north. Operating in ice, instrumentation, marine sensing, oceanographic monitoring. All of those things are areas that are actively being worked on by many of our ocean tech companies. And as I say, I think they have equal application to assisting Canadian companies as we explore opportunities to further develop the North.
Well, I do cut you there. You're substantially over Mr. McColman, and then it'll be Mr. Greywall, and we'll have to wrap up.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for being here. You mentioned in your presentation a company called Statoil, and they are, I just want to get a little bit more detail about that. I believe they're a Norwegian company, and they had significant investment in Western Canada, which they threw up their hands and said, we can't do business here because of the regulations that they were facing, and they abandoned that. But you say they have an investment in offshore fields. Can you describe more of that to us?
What I described, or what I was alluding to, was a development or a potential development in the Flemish Pass. It's a deep water development. It's at the very early stages. At this stage, it has potential, as we understand it, for 300 to 700 million barrels of oil. But at this stage, it's still a prospect and a project under development. It still has to go through the full environmental assessment and environmental review process, but still very much in the early stages.
And it's Statoil that's funding the feasibility of this?
They're the operator. They're the owner.
Operator. Good. Yeah, because I remember meeting them in Ottawa a couple years ago to try to work them through some of the difficulties they were having on the environmental front, in fact, at that time, and they weren't able to work it out in terms of their business plan to be able to make sense of their, and it was also the drop in the price that had a big determination of that. Just on that front, on the oil business front, and not to belabor the fact that we're probably stuck with a much lower price. How is oil transported from the offshore rigs? How is it transported?
And again, I'm a little out of my element here, but I know the gravity-based structures, the facility, and the FPSO, the fixed production storage and offloading facilities, have storage on board, and then the oil is transported to Whiffen Head, which is near Combychance in eastern Newfoundland, and then available then for transport or transshipment to whoever the customer would be.
From that terminal, it would either go by rail or
no, by tanker, by ocean vessel.
By ocean vessel, okay. And that pretty much answers my questions, Chair.
Okay, we'll go to Mr. Greywall. We need to get Ms. Skinner on the record here somehow too, so she's the first time before a parliamentary committee. She needs to say at least hi.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Madame Skinner and Mr. Martin, for coming today. I'm just on the ACOA website, and I have a company here called Verafin Incorporated. And it seems like the quintessential example of what ACOA is all about, helping a small startup getting access to bigger markets. And I'm very, very happy to see that. So this company basically is involved in financial analytics and helping banks combat financial fraud. My concern here is, as companies expand, are they still maintaining presence in the province? Because I'm assuming because of what the nature of the industry they're in, they're going to end up in Toronto, in New York, in London. What percentage of your companies are staying local, increasing employment locally, contributing to the local economy, while still, using the province as a hub to continue their business?
We have quite a number of companies that are homegrown, and Verafin is a perfect example of that. Just to give you a very thumbnail sketch of what they've done, but Verafin was actually started by 3 engineering students, graduates from Memorial's Faculty of Engineering, and The company grew. It was incubated at Memorial University's Genesis Center. They became a client of the agencies through their growth and formation, and they've since secured significant private investment. So Verafin is a quintessential example of a company that's grown all the way through the full continuum here right in Newfoundland and Labrador. So we have quite a number of companies and quite a number of entrepreneurs that have followed a similar track. I think the propensity or the power of Newfoundlanders and Labradorians to want to stay home and to want to do things at home, to make things happen in their community, is probably what serves us best. And I think Jamie King and his colleagues are a perfect example of that. So we've had very good success in taking companies that have grown to international caliber and have decided to stay in Newfoundland, pursue their development, and manage their growth right at home.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I will pass the remaining of my time on to Ms. O'Connell.
Thank you so much, and thank you for allowing me the time. My family is actually from Newfoundland, so my mom was born there. So every year my grandfather goes home. It's kind of the interesting story of coming to Ontario to find work. This is how we ended up in Ontario. But my question is around tourism, following up on this. Just again, it's more to have the background. This is just a personal experience, so I want to know more about if it's actually the reality on the ground. But for example, when my grandfather goes back, staying with family but can't rent a car, you know, everything is sold out in terms of, we're from Upper Island Cove, so it's a smaller community. But, you know, at first I didn't believe him that you couldn't get a car. I thought he was being a little dramatic. So I went online and you cannot rent a car in the summer months. So in terms of the opportunity for tourism, certainly I could see it just from my own personal experience. But the question is really around the seasonality of it. From what I understand from my colleagues from the province is that it's hard for tourism companies, businesses to really invest in things like, for example, rental cars. And I use this as an example only because of my experience, that it's not worth it to them or profitable enough to have that type of investment all year long when really tourism is seasonality. So I would see agencies like yourself that could help these companies. Where do you see, or how can you best position these companies to take that opportunity to have the infrastructure there when the high tourism season hits?
That's a really good question, and I would say it's not unique to rentals. I think some of those same challenges often apply to accommodations. You know, and it's like that in many jurisdictions where you have a seasonality element. It's often very difficult to get things at the height of the season, whether it's a rental car or a room, but much easier in other periods. We work with, we're directly involved. We participate in the Provincial Tourism Board. We have a seat on the Provincial Tourism Board. We engage with Hospitality Newfoundland and Labrador, our Provincial Tourism Association. And one of the best ways to combat that, and as you say, like, it's difficult to get rental car companies to increase their fleet when they know that the time period when they will actually be able to put those out on the road is fairly short. But one of the things that we've been trying to do, working with our provincial tourism and our industry partners, is to extend the season. You know, the shoulder season in the spring and fall. Many of our tourism attractions, like if you've been to Trinity, they offer quite a number of events and activities now in the shoulder season, either in early spring or late fall. And what we've seen as well is packaging, or opportunities where the accommodations operator, the venue, or the event venue will actually work in collaboration to provide packages to encourage folks to come during the shoulder season. So I think the best approach is to try and find those mechanisms to extend outside of that period when everybody wants to be there, our 3 weeks of summer, as we like to say. And I think we've been having very good success with that so far.
Great.
Thank you, Jen. Just as a last question, do you have any suggestions? I mean, this committee will make some recommendations to the Department of Finance and the Minister. Do you have any suggestions as a COA in your area of areas of whether it's in government programming or whether it's more money or whatever it might be that would make it possible for you to attain better results and better economic growth in your area of jurisdiction? You know, I was just reading here actually in the area of robotics, which is not in, I don't think, your area, but 6 Canada research chairs in robotics, none are in Atlantic Canada. That's a problem. But is there any areas where you would say the federal government could be putting different input in which would assist you in terms of doing your work?
Well, as I've mentioned earlier in my remarks, I feel that both in terms of programming and FTEs, we're in good shape. The agency does have the flexibility to adjust how we deliver our programming to focus on areas of opportunity. We commit all of our resources. We always commit our full resources. If the Government of Canada saw fit to increase the agency's budget and ask that we step up our efforts in areas of core responsibility, and that's around innovation, around international business development, around skills and productivity improvement, we would most certainly, I think, you'd have my assurance that those resources will be well deployed. But I do think that we are well resourced now and have the ability to do the work and deliver on the mandate that we've been given.
Okay, nothing further you just want to add?
Nope.
All right. We will suspend for a few minutes and then go to Fed Nor. Thank you very much, both Ms. Skinner and Mr. Martin, for appearing before us and your answers.
Thank you very much.
and welcome the Federal Economic Development Initiative for Northern Ontario, better known as FedNor. With us we have Mr. DiMatteo, if that's close, Mr. DiMatteo, Director General, and Ms. Perot, Director Corporate Services. How do you pronounce your name, Lisa?
Lisa Setliqui, and I'm the Associate ADM located here in Ottawa.
Thank you very much. Okay, Mr. DiMatteo, the floor is yours.
Lisa's fine. So I'll just say a couple of things. Lisa Setliqui once again, and I work with the Department of Innovation, Science and Economic Development located here in Ottawa. But I am joined by Amy DiMatteo and Lucie Perot, who are both located in the region and directly managing FedNor and its programs and its relationships with stakeholders in that region. And so I will ask Amy DiMatteo to make opening remarks.
Thank you. The floor is yours. Go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. Good afternoon, Chair and committee members. Thank you for the opportunity to be in front of you this afternoon to talk to you about FedNor. My opening remarks will attempt to set the context in terms of the structure in which FedNor works with and the region that we serve. So FedNor is a regional development organization that is responsible for economic development, job creation, and economic diversification in Northern Ontario. It delivers on this mandate through its programs and initiatives, but just as importantly, we deliver it through our partnership and our collaboration with all other federal departments in the province of Ontario and other stakeholders in Northern Ontario. FedNor has a very large service area. Northern Ontario represents 90% of the landmass of the province of Ontario, but is home to only 7% of the population. Of that, slightly more than half of Northern Ontario's 833,000 population residents live in 5 major urban centres. So the remaining folks live in smaller rural communities and in First Nation communities also. In total, we have 150 municipalities, and of those 150, 80% have populations of 2,000 people or less. The region is also home to 110 of the 126 First Nations in Ontario. Close to 90% of those 110 First Nations have fewer than 1,000 people living on reserve. And of those 110 First Nation communities, 29 of them are remote communities that are accessible only by air and in the winter by Winter Road. Northern Ontario faces a number of what I would term significant challenges. First, while progress continues towards building a more diversified economy, the region remains highly dependent on resource sectors, making Northern Ontario's economy susceptible to global economic downturns and market fluctuations. We see these fluctuations now playing out in the mining industry and certainly in the steel industry, and not as recently in the forestry industry, where there was a major downturn several years ago that we are now coming out of. Second challenge that I would raise to the committee would be with respect to the large number of Northern Ontario communities that, as I've mentioned previously, are small, rural, and in many cases remote. Many of these small communities lack the capacity, both a fiscal capacity and a human capacity, to take advantage of economic opportunities requiring support from FedNor to assist in laying the framework, the groundwork needed to support them in their efforts to spur economic development and economic diversification in the communities that they represent. Third challenge relates to the small and medium-sized enterprises that constitute Northern Ontario. It remains a concern that these SMEs, and most of them are small, have a difficult time in accessing funding for their projects, given that they are in rural areas away from traditional funders in many cases, and secondly, that because they are located where they are located in small, rural, remote communities, that the risk factor is considered higher, and so when they go to the traditional sources of funding, they are all too often told, no, sorry, we can't fund you because the risk is too high. In addition, Northern Ontario's vast geography and our low population combine to amplify challenges related to transportation, infrastructure, energy costs, ICT broadband, and gaps still related across the north, and access to a skilled workforce. For example, many companies continue to have difficulty finding skilled workers to replace retiring employees. Two recent studies that were carried out, one in the Northeast by Laurentian University and one in the Northwest by Lakehead University in Thunder Bay, found that over the next 5 years, in the mining and forestry industries alone, with retiring employees, there will be a need for approximately 40,000 new workers to be found in each of those two jurisdictions. In regards to manufacturing, Northern Ontario lags the province significantly, unfortunately. We have 880 manufacturers in the region in Northern Ontario. This accounts for only 4% of manufacturers across all of the province. Of those, roughly 19% are involved in exporting their products outside the region, both nationally and internationally, compared to 42% in Southern Ontario. Our major industries, forestry, mining, and steel, are huge users of energy. And I'm sure you've been hearing, no doubt, about the energy costs in Ontario, and those energy costs in Northern Ontario are higher than other jurisdictions, affecting the ability of the companies in these industries to make investments needed to take advantage of growth opportunities and to continue to diversify their business operations. To all of this, FedNor, through its support of strategic projects and collaboration with all of the federal, provincial, municipal, and First Nation partners, continue to work to address these challenges and promote opportunities in the region. These challenges are not new to Northern Ontario. We have suffered the cycles in mining and forestry industries time and time again. Stakeholders are, above all, resilient and continue to focus their efforts on opportunities for diversification, as opposed to simply putting up their hands and saying the challenge is too great. So I'd like to now turn my attention to the opportunities that we have in Northern Ontario and that FedNor is involved in to a great extent. A growing global demand for minerals, coupled with the region's rich mineral resources and reserves, and knowledgeable and innovative mining cluster, represents a wealth of opportunities in our mining sector. This includes a generational mining opportunity known as the Ring of Fire development, which I'd be pleased to speak to you in more detail on later in the presentation. Northern Ontario mining sector is innovative. It is world-class, it is world-renowned, and it does business across the globe in many jurisdictions and finds itself in a very enviable position of being able to provide those kinds of services globally. And emerging from a long downturn and facing the expiry of the softwood lumber agreement, the forestry industry is now making large investments in value-added forest products and new clean and green technology that is resulting in both operational improvements, in growth in these companies, and bottom line, in jobs being created in the communities in which they reside. As an example, in Thunder Bay, a major strategic partnership is currently leading efforts to establish a wood-based biochemical cluster, a project that aims to hasten mass production and the successful commercialization of green biochemicals derived from wood in Northern Ontario. In a nutshell, rather than looking at a tree as a 2x4 or a 2x6, we are now looking at a tree for the chemical compounds that it represents and how it can add value into the chain of products that we see developed in the world. This is a major initiative featuring a number of important industry players: Resolute Forest Products, a major international company, as well as Natural Resources Canada, Sustainable Development Technology Canada, the Province of Ontario, Lakehead University, FedNor itself, who have been working in collaboration to develop this innovative technology and bioproducts that can be marketed to the world. This is a great example of what the future holds in the forestry industry that we believe will continue to prosper and bring value added to the communities in Northern Ontario. Thirdly, agriculture is also on the rise in Northern Ontario, in large part because of the affordability of the land in Northern Ontario. With over 1 million acres of available agricultural land, you can buy an acre of land in Northern Ontario for approximately $500, whereas in Southern Ontario, that same acre of land will cost you somewhere between $5,000 to as much as $25,000. FedNor is working diligently, with community and industry partners seeking to take advantage of this opportunity. Longer growing seasons are enabling our agricultural businesses to grow different kinds of crops, creating a more productive and diverse agricultural landscape across Northern Ontario. The region is also home to other existing and emerging innovation clusters in areas including healthcare, research, and green technology. And again, I'd be pleased to offer more comment in those regards. Lastly, and probably one of the most significant key opportunities that Northern Ontario has involves the region's significant Indigenous population. So again, 110 of the 126 First Nation communities in the province are located in Northern Ontario. While the North's overall population continues to decline, if not now flatline, First Nation communities are seeing their populations increase. And with 29% of the local Indigenous population under the age of 15, it is clear that the contributions of Indigenous youth will be vital to the North's future success. It's an opportunity to promote a more proactive and participatory approach to economic development in those communities, including the advancement of resource development opportunities in the far north, where many of our remote communities are located. In conclusion, Chair, FedNor has and will continue to act as the Government of Canada's lead economic development organization to help Northern Ontario communities diversify their economies and prosper in the future. I believe that FedNor is well positioned to deliver on its mandate, the government's priorities, and to work in unison with all of its partners to ensure that communities across Northern Ontario are provided with the tools they need to help them succeed in the future. Thank you for allowing me these opening comments, and I look forward to your questions.
Thank you, Mr. DiMatteo. Turning to Mr. Sabera.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I actually wish to give my allotment of time to my friend and colleague from the riding of Sudbury, Paul Lefebvre.
Thank you.
Mr. Lefebvre.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Bienvenue, re-bienvenue à Ottawa. Je suis content de vous voir.
Welcome back to Ottawa. It's a pleasure to see you.
First, I'd like just to give a sense to the committee as to the budget that is allocated to FedNor, and I want this that we address this because I hear from a lot of my constituents, people in Northern Ontario, that do apply for FedNor funding for certain programs, and sometimes they're told, well, it's oversubscribed. So first, let's talk about the budget, then we'll talk about how many people are applying and the different types of requests that you're receiving from these different groups.
Okay, thank you. FedNor's main program, its flagship program, is called the Northern Ontario Development Program, fondly called NODP, and its base budget sits at $31.5 million, and it has been at that level for the last few years. We have seen previously some increases for specific project allocations to do a specific project, but after that, the base budget is $31.5 million. Clearly, we receive far more applications.
Around how much in general of applications do you receive on a yearly basis, on average?
On average, We probably, in terms of applications that we approve, we're in the 250 to 300 range of applications that FedNor is able to provide assistance towards.
Okay, and how much funding are the, if you put all the requests that come in together, about how much would that represent?
Let me give you maybe this fiscal year as an example. Yes. We have probably received in excess of 300 plus requests for over $90 million this fiscal year.
So 90 million, but you have 31.5.
And we've got 31.5. Hence my comment about the importance of our collaboration and work with other federal departments and programs and the province of Ontario.
But let's just talk about this oversubscription of 90 million. Because I know there is a lot of small businesses, and there are also a lot of small communities that apply for infrastructure funding through FedNor as well. Is that correct?
Yes, that is correct.
And so we're looking at small business applying, small communities applying, and as well as on the cultural front as well, right? A lot of cultural groups also request funding. Yeah, can you explain a bit of the?
Yes, again, our flagship program has three priorities: innovation, community economic development, and business growth and competition. We are open to receive applications from municipalities, First Nation communities, not-for-profit, private sector, and any other legal entity that is looking to do business in Northern Ontario that meets the criteria of our program under one of those three headings.
Now, of this 31.5 million, that's what you get on an annual basis. How much is already provided for certain programs that are on an annual basis that is funded by FedNor? So how much is left to actually give out to some of the applications?
We probably do a majority of our business in multi-year projects, so it's not just a single project for a short period of time. And so we'll approve a project that may have a 2 or 3 year span, and so we'll see commitments being made into next year. I would say to you that probably, generally speaking, FedNor has entered each fiscal year with at least 75% of its budget already committed towards existing approved projects, leaving then 25% for us to entertain new applications throughout the fiscal year.
You talked also a lot about the collaborations in between the province and FedNor. As you're more than aware, the province of Ontario has the Northern Ontario Heritage Fund, which is funded to the amount of $100 million. Is that correct?
That is correct, sir.
Okay. Now, I know also when people apply, like say your collaboration, from what I understand, people apply to NOHFC, as it's called, and they apply to FedNor at the same time, correct?
Correct. We do a lot of deals with the province of Ontario through the Northern Ontario Heritage Fund Corporation. Yeah. Again, for the members, it is my, if you will, sister organization provincially that covers the same jurisdiction and has predominantly the same mandate as FedNor. So we find ourselves receiving the same types of applications from the constituency that we both serve.
Now, given thank you. Given the funding that you have of 31.5 million, and then you have the amount of 100 million, are certain projects that may not go forward because they have to rely on the matching funds, some from the province and some from the feds as well?
Sorry, yes, there are projects that unfortunately do not get funded by FedNor, resulting in us looking for other sources of funding for these applicants. And in some cases, unfortunately, that applicants have got to put their projects on hold, awaiting then to perhaps reapply or while they're searching out other sources of funding also.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Just so I'm clear on one point you raised, in terms of the infrastructure that you talked about that you fund, are you the delivery, do you do the delivery of infrastructure funds that is funded out of another portfolio or file other than FedNor? Or is it FedNor money that's going into that infrastructure program?
It is a combination of both, sir. FedNor does have, out of its own fund, its NODP funding, we provide funds for infrastructure financing. We also do provide again, on behalf of the federal government, with all of my colleague regional development agencies across the country, we will deliver infrastructure programming for the government when they ask us to do so.
That's a mix across the country now. COA no longer does that in Atlantic Canada. Mr. Elboutev.
Very much. I guess I'm very happy to hear you and read your report. Seems the very first bright spot in the last couple of days in terms of our economies across the country. The first two questions that comes to my mind: what is the unemployment rate in your region?
It will vary from we have what I would term three regions in Northern Ontario: Northeast, Northwest, and the Far North, and so it will vary. I would say to you, I would suggest it would be between 8 to 11%.
Okay, and in your report, you seem to, to lack. Everything seems to be working, and future plans and midterm plans are in place. The one thing you mentioned that you have lack of population, or you would rather have more population up there. So how this is going to be justified in terms of the rate of unemployment you have there, and how you can employ that into making the economy better?
Well, both unemployment and attracting and keeping residents in Northern Ontario, keeping our youth in Northern Ontario are extremely important to us. Hence that's why I mentioned earlier about the growing Aboriginal population and our needing to work with them to ensure that they are well educated, they are provided the skills and opportunities to take on the jobs in the future in Northern Ontario.
So the future, where now the federal government can play in order to assist you reaching or achieving your goal? And how much you think of an investment is needed from the government in order to be able to reach to the midterm, long-term goals that you have?
Certainly, the government continues to invest in FedNor, and so in that regard, we are pleased with the resources that are being provided to FedNor for the purposes of carrying out the mandate and of course in line with the government's priorities. We are always looking for opportunities for growth, whether that be listening to an earlier witness talking about the opportunity that if more resources were provided to that organization, and I would say similar to FedNor, we would be able to accomplish more. Having said that, that's why it's so important. In the absence, I'd like to have more money, but in the absence of that, it's important for me to be able to work very cooperatively and collaboratively with all the other programs that are available, both federally and provincially, to ensure that a good idea in Northern Ontario doesn't go unmet.
Now, the collaboration between Southern Alberta, where the main hub of basically the economy of Ontario, and the northern part, which is your area, how much of a collaboration there, and how much you can count on the development on the southern part of the province?
We work quite closely with FedDev on a number of fronts, and as we do with now all of our regional development agencies across the country. But particular to FedDev, we are the province of Ontario, and so there are joint opportunities that materialize. I talked earlier about the forestry industry and looking at trying to develop a bioeconomy. We are doing so with the help of the expertise of FedDev, who's got expertise in these kinds of areas, and so we do work collaboratively just by exchanging information on a regular basis.
Do I have one more question, one final question? The oil downturn, the energy pricing, altogether that basically affect the overall Canadian economy. How much you were affected by it in the midst of the increasing of energy cost or pricing in Ontario at large?
As I said earlier, energy costs are a big concern, are a challenge in Northern Ontario, given that the industries that generally represent the economy in Northern Ontario are highly dependent on energy. And so in that regard, we are very pleased with the province of Ontario's programming in terms of trying to reduce the cost for those, what I'll term heavy users, plus recent announcements made by the province of Ontario looking at doing some more work in terms of trying to bring electricity costs down. The less the cost, the more then a business has the opportunity to take that money and reinvest it into other opportunities and grow their business.
Thank you both. Turning to Mr. Angus, 5 minutes. Welcome to the Finance Committee. Charlie?
Thank you, Mr. Easter. You know, when I was a young lad and I was first elected, you were on my first committee, so I feel like I've come full circle in my career. I'd like to thank you, FedNor, for being here. You play an extraordinarily important role in our region. I'd like to thank, at the beginning, the amazing work FedNor's done in the promotion of our regional mining innovation small business at the PDAC conference. I remember going to PDAC when Northern Ontario was, as my grandfather would say, down in the cellar behind the axe. And we have the best location in this biggest international mining festival in the world, and FedNor plays a huge part. So I want to thank you for that. I note that since 2010, FedNor supported $3.8 million in broadband funding. And rural broadband and economic development in our region. Without rural broadband, we've got no ability to compete. But I've got all these letters from FedNor to various rural broadband agencies this year, since the new government came in, saying, unfortunately, the demand currently exceeds available funding, and FedNor will not be able to support your broadband projects. So is that a result of not having enough funding, or a decision to stop funding rural broadband through FedNor?
I would suggest, first, thank you for your kind comments about FedNor. We certainly believe we play a very important role in Northern Ontario. With respect to broadband, FedNor has historically been involved in broadband and has funded broadband development across Northern Ontario. This most recent year, the government announced a new broadband program, $500 million, that it is in the process of unveiling. It's important that FedNor take a step back and not duplicate the efforts of a Pan-Canada program. And we have done so previously, and this is a reflection of what we're doing now. And so we had a number of broadband applications that we were in the process of reviewing and hopefully looking at making recommendations to support on. But as a result of the new broadband program coming on stream, we felt it was more prudent for us to pass those applications on to again, within my own department for that consideration.
Thank you for that. I don't want to sound terse, I only have 5 minutes, but I guess what's shocking to me is that we had rural broadband projects with matching provincial funds, and we desperately need broadband. We need it now. But this Liberal government decided that they were going to take it over through a new program, and I'm looking at this new program, and it's not up and running till sometime in 2017. So we've lost 2 years in our communities in terms of economic development. And I would think it would have been better to leave our northern businesses with FedNor, because you were ready to deliver those funds this year, but that's not being delivered. So I want to just move on this. In 2009, FedNor had 120 employees. The last I saw, you were down to 80. Are those numbers still roughly the same?
Yes, they are. Our current count is, I believe, 81 employees.
Okay, and I'm looking over the overall broadband, or the FedNor funding over the last number of years. In the mid-2000s, we were getting $76, $68, $78 million a year. Are we down, did you say $31 million this year?
FedNor's base budget for its flagship program is $31.5 million, correct.
Right. And you say that 75% of the money's already allocated at the beginning of the year, so we're turning projects down. I think FedNor could do an extremely important role if it was a standalone agency, but it's always really difficult for us to find these numbers because FedNor is the poor cousin of all the other economic development agencies. If you were able to have the funding that you had in the 2000s, and even when the last Conservative government first came in before they started cutting the funds, would you be able to respond to many of these great projects that are not being funded right now?
Clearly, I mean, if we had an opportunity to receive additional resources, we would certainly look to then do more activity across Northern Ontario.
Okay,
we do within our current budget. We try to maximize as best as we can all the good project work that's going to bring the results to Northern Ontario.
Well, I guess this is what's concerning to me, because I meet really smart innovation ideas all the time, and we just, FedNor, and your staff are out on the ground, I can say that. But I noticed in 2013, 2014, $8.5 million out of FedNor's much more diminished budget wasn't spent and returned to Treasury Board. Do you expect you'll spend all the money this year?
Absolutely. We have, over the last couple of years now, spent our full budget. The $8.5 million that you referred to that slipped in the fiscal year that you referred to resulted from two particular initiatives that we were hoping to launch during the fiscal year that were delayed. And in one case, one was a broadband initiative. And the government of the day introduced a Pan-Canada broadband initiative, and so we were asked to step back, and so that resulted in a number of anticipated projects that we were hoping to fund that we were not able to. So that was the result. That resulted in the slippage. We were fortunate in the following year to receive an additional $3 million to offset some of that slippage in the next fiscal year.
We'll have to cut you both there. Sorry, Charlie. Mr. Ouellette.
Very much for coming here today, sir. I was just wondering if you could describe what you actually do with the Indigenous people specifically, and some of the specific projects that are not the 150th anniversary projects, but specific actual long-term job projects.
Thank you. We do a lot of business with Indigenous communities. As I said, we have 110 First Nation communities in Northern Ontario, and we provide support to them from a perspective of doing a strategic plan, helping to establish an economic development office, industrial park incubator malls, to helping build community infrastructure necessary to promote economic development, looking at airport development opportunities in some of our remote communities where, of course, they're reliant on the airport, and so they need the best infrastructure available at that site. So there's a whole host of things that we do on a regular basis with our First Nation partners.
I was wondering if you ever help First Nations negotiate, for instance, resource extraction deals with other companies. Because you talked about capacity, or a lot of agencies have come up here and talked about the lack of capacity, and so you create a training program. But I was wondering if you ever fund the actual negotiation of these resource extraction or help with First Nations doing that.
No, we don't, and we haven't been asked to do so. The First Nation communities in my history with working with them shy away from wanting the government to be involved in the negotiations of what are termed IBAs, they're individual benefit agreements with companies. They do that themselves. When I talk about capacity building, I'm talking about the economic capacity building of communities. So, how are we supposed to work with the community if they don't have an economic development office, if they don't have a strategic plan? How do we ever expect to make a difference in those communities and spur on economic development opportunities without that kind of basic capacity in play?
Well, my fear was you talked also about the Ring of Fire, how it was a potential, a great potential, and but if you're a First Nations or a community that's trying to negotiate on your traditional territory, a certain level of ristourne, or an amount of money that comes back to the community in the long term, in jobs and long-term benefits for your education sector or economic development over the long term, and not just simply be having jobs which are cleaning the toilets or dropping off food and things like that, but really good long-term jobs. And you say they don't have the capacity. I'm kind of a little confused, like how you actually, are you allowed to help them with those things? Maybe they don't know you could.
If we were asked to provide funding to hire lawyers to negotiate those kinds of agreements, no, we would not. Now, these First Nation communities receive funding from INAC, as you would be aware, and their funding is given to them in bundles, if I can use that word. And so they have an opportunity to take the money that they are provided for administration and determine how they're going to use it. So there is some flexibility within the funding envelope that they get from INAC, for those purposes, but specific to FedNor, we try to stay away from those negotiations.
It's always interesting because I've actually seen, I've watched, I wasn't a participant in this, but I watched very closely one community negotiate a gold mine, and literally the chief said to the gold company, I don't really understand what you're saying. I hope you just give me a fair deal. And he didn't receive any funding or any help from INAC. He didn't receive any funding or help from any other agency, and he was just out there, signing away his, essentially his rights. And my fear is in 30 years, we'll be still at the same situation we're at today. And yet it seems you have an agency that could be, perhaps is an arm's length from INAC. You're not really INAC. So you have more of a distance between that relationship, where a lot of Indigenous peoples really don't like Indigenous in Northern Affairs or Indian in Northern Affairs Canada. And perhaps you have a role that you could play in the future, a potential role you could play.
Thank you. We'll certainly take that under advisement. We have funded. I'm just being reminded here that we have funded over 111 projects with Indigenous communities across this broad spectrum that I defined to you earlier. And so again, it's where do we put our limited resources to make sure that we get the best outcomes. And it's not to say that negotiating these individual benefit agreements with whether it's a mining company or forestry company or whatever it might be, it's not important. It's just an area that FedNor has not played in.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Mr.
I think.
Yes, Lisa.
Sometimes it's not always just about the money, and I know that FedNor has been, like, for example, on the Ring of Fire, doing some work to understand what the economics are of that value proposition, and equipping those communities that may be benefiting from that with that kind of knowledge, and helping them position themselves to have those kinds of negotiations. So while we wouldn't be directly involved in those negotiations, the work that we do helps to kind of lay the groundwork and enables those communities to understand, ultimately what they should be asking for in those negotiations.
Mr. McColman.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, witnesses, for being here. I want to go down really two avenues. First of all, I appreciate your presentation on softwood lumber. You've turned what possibly will be a very negative thing happening to the economics of areas that rely on forestry to something that's marketable going forward. But on the balance, that's one project. On balance, do you feel if there's tariffs thrown up against softwood lumber as a result of not having a deal this fall, that's going to affect other players in the softwood business in your area?
I'm not an expert when it comes to the softwood lumber agreement, but I can tell you that the example that I gave you, that I can give you some other examples where we help a sawmill in Kenora Forest Sawmill, which is a softwood lumber company, and we worked with them to explore a new market in Japan for what's called stress-rated lumber. So they're still producing 2x4s and 2x6s. But they've now found a market for a very particular niche product called stress-rated lumber, and that relates to the more direct, the more clear the grain is in a piece of wood, the stronger it is. Of course, think about Japan and all of the activities that occur there with respect to ground movement.
Can I just stop you there on that one, because I do have a limited amount of time. I want to talk about energy. You brought up, I've asked this of all the economic development bodies that have been here, and I'm not asking you to be political here. Let's be very clear. I'm asking you to give your thoughts on this. If the Energy East pipeline were to be approved, to be built, how would that affect the economics of your region?
I'm sorry, sir. I cannot offer any comment in that
Very
regard.
good. Okay, fair enough.
Not sufficiently.
Fair enough. The other comment I want to talk about is energy and how important it is in the northern environment especially. The price of energy. And I know in Southern Ontario, where I'm from, many companies I've met with over the last 3 months have brought me their electrical bills showing me increases of 100% year to year. Is that happening in the north?
I can't offer a comment in terms of whether it's 100% or not. I can indicate that it is an issue in Northern Ontario, high energy prices, and so we're working with companies to look at other opportunities to generate their own revenue, to generate their own energy by using bio opportunities in that regard, which is reducing their energy costs. So we're looking at what are the alternatives. While this is a provincial jurisdiction, what can the federal government do to offset some of the costs by introducing new technology? And so we're very focused on that front in terms of helping those companies in that regard.
Well, I appreciate you saying that, but I'm going to push you a little bit on this one. If you're not aware of those costs and you're evaluating business plans, if you're not aware that that's the kind of increase Ontario has been placing on electricity for business and for residential customers, then please explain that to me, how you don't know the fact that that is the case.
Sorry if I wasn't clear. Certainly we're aware of the matter, and so as companies come to us with a business opportunity, they give to us their financials, and so we see that information in their financials. And so it's not to say that we're blind to it. We are aware that it is an issue. We see what the costs are, in their financial statements, and where we can provide assistance, we attempt to do so.
I appreciate what you've said, because you've said the costs are so high, it perhaps can justify the cost of a generator or something else, another type of electricity provider to the operations, and I appreciate you saying that. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. McCollum. And Mr. McKinnon.
Thanks very much. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Merci à vous tous d'être là.
Thank you both for being here. I asked the same question to the people from the other agencies. We will be discussing the recommendations that we will be making to the Minister of Finance. Clearly, we're looking for areas where we can encourage growth for Canada. In Northern Ontario, what would be, if it came to pass, what would happen if you had more money, if it came to pass? What would be the emerging sectors that would be affected? Is there any glimmer of hope, any type of a ceiling for growth for this area of Ontario? Thank you very much for your question.
Ontario, and some examples would include on the health front. So we help to fund one of 4 cyclotrons that exist across the country. And so we have funded the Thunder Bay Regional Research Institute, which is a world-class research institute on health in Thunder Bay, in partnership with Lakehead University, the hospital, Province of Ontario, and a number of private sector companies that are now coming together to form a cluster around using isotopes that are formed from the cyclotron, and using them at this point in time for non-human testing, but moving them into, once they can get approval from Health Canada, for human testing. It's a tremendous growth opportunity in that regard. Similarly, in northeastern Ontario, working with the regional health organization and their research institute, they are doing world-class work on vaccines. And they have already attracted some 10 or 12 private sector companies to come and work with them in Northern Ontario and to establish themselves there and to continue testing vaccines for the purposes of potentially then growing that arm of the business. Certainly the mining sector, I said earlier in my remarks, is a world-class cluster. We provide products and services to the world. Robotics You want to know about robotics? You come to Northern Ontario and talk to our companies. You want to talk about deep mining, 2-3 miles underground, and all of the issues that go with that? You come to Northern Ontario. And so it is a cluster that, while mining is still a fundamental activity of Northern Ontario, it's the emerging technology coming from our experiences that are allowing us to continue to grow this industry. So that would be another area of tremendous growth. I spoke briefly about agriculture. I think it is a hugely emerging opportunity for Northern Ontario. 1 million available acres in the Temiskaming area and in the Northwestern Ontario, Fort Frances, Rainy River area. We will be able to compete again with a lot of jurisdictions in terms of food product and growing food crops for the future. It is a huge area of opportunity for our First Nation communities, particularly those that are remote. And so they're very interested in partnering, and we are working with Indigenous communities to help them take advantage of business opportunities related to agriculture also.
Donc, si le gouvernement voulait...
So if the government wanted to invest in regional development through you or elsewhere, and if it wanted to get an almost certain return on its investment, would you have place for that? Would you be able to take that into account, this type of investment?
I mean, if we had more money, we would look to make more investments, on the innovation front in working with our communities in terms of looking for development opportunities. We try to do the best that we can with the limited budget or with the budget that we have. We have to make difficult decisions. Not all projects get funded, but at the same time, I think we can stand the test of ensuring that we are providing investments to those activities with the highest level of return and in line with the government's priorities of innovation, clean technology, Indigenous communities, and supporting communities that have previously, certainly in Northern Ontario, been single industry dependent and single industry threatened.
Si je me trompe pas...
Sorry, Steve, that's it. Last series of questions. Ms. Wright.
We're at the end of, thank you for your presentation. We're at the conclusion pretty much of having the regional development agencies come in. And I read your testimony when you appeared before Industry Committee back in April. And it's pretty much the same comments. And what I bring that up because these are pre-budget consultations, and it is an opportunity for a regional development agency to come in and essentially pitch MPs on what you think you need more of. And you're not alone in this. I'm just observing unfortunately, you're the last ones. And maybe you can take it back to industry. But I'm a little disappointed that there were not a lot of asks. And I think you're the only one to actually point out the fact that you'd like to have more money. Thank you very much. And it'd be better if we had more money. And I don't think it's a bad thing to ask. So, bearing in mind that I think you're pretty smart people, I do have one question. Very interested in single industry towns. Coming from Cape Breton, obviously, we had a single kind of industry town, and all the industries left town, so there really isn't anything. And it really hasn't rebounded in 40 years to any extent. Do you have any innovative ideas you'd like to pitch us on right now on a program, a policy, something for us to look at that may be able to alleviate the problems? You guys are on the ground. You understand what's happening in these small communities. And it would be really nice just to, as an MP, have an idea of some innovative thinking that's going on within the development agency or in Industry Canada to solve some of these problems, because it's our opportunity to tell the Minister of Finance what direction we think he should be going in when it comes to all of these regional economic development agencies. I want you to be more than a service provider, a pass-through of government funds, and tell me what you think we should be doing.
Well, clearly we, of course, majority of our communities, unfortunately, in Northern Ontario have suffered with single industry collapses, whether they be in forestry, mining, or steel recently in Sault Ste. Marie as an example.
Exactly.
and you know, they're cyclical in nature to a certain extent. And so what we're trying to do is say, well, we know it will occur again, but what can we do in the interim? What better product, what better service, what better business can you do while awaiting the next cycle to come up or down? And so, you know, and I've said this to many companies, if you're going to come to me and say you want to open another sawmill, good luck, Godspeed, but not here. But if you want to come and talk to me about business opportunities in terms of new products, like the company in Kenora that I spoke of, or in terms of the biochemical opportunity that we're dealing with Resolute, those are game changers. That's taking an industry away from a traditional self-reliance of just taking the ore out of the ground or cutting the tree down for a 2x4, 2x6. And so we're really focused on that. It is part of this government's innovation agenda. We have been in FedNor, its flagship program, one of our three focuses has been innovation. So we continue to promote that and continue to look for opportunities where we can make even further investments. We are working with our 5 innovation centers across Northern Ontario, and we're working with our private sector to come up with new ideas.
Okay.
Because unfortunately, it's not government that usually comes up with the ideas, it's private sector.
No, that's not unfortunately. That's actually quite good. That is private sector.
If I can just add to that, because I'm also from a very small town that was a single industry and that collapsed. I'm from Thetford Mines, Quebec, which was asbestos mining. What I would say that, and of course, certainly that the shutdown of that industry, we've never completely rebounded. But, and I think this is what we're getting better at and that we need to do more of, is these one industry towns have a whole supply chain around them. And I think what we need to be better at is ensuring that those supply chains are not solely dependent on that industry, and it's about diversification. And I think that's the role that all the RDAs play. And that way, you don't have all your eggs in one basket.
I hear you. One very quickly, question. And it's very simple. Is the money coming from, are the ideas coming from within the regional area, or are people coming into the region to pitch you? Do you know what I mean? Are they come from a ways, or are they people local?
For the most part, it's people from within the jurisdiction that are living and residing in these communities and are part of these businesses, and so they're pitching us the ideas. Every once in a while, we'll get somebody to, you know, so for example, on the agricultural front, where you know, Cattlemen's Association, either the Ontario one or the Canadian one will say, 1 million acres of available land. Ooh, wow, we'd like to talk to you about that. So we're always open for both.
And if there's a capacity, like you talked about the health and the cyclotron, like that in and of itself attracts them. You know, so it's kind of, you know, really maximizing on where those pockets are.
Okay, good. Thank you, Mr. Chair, for that.
Thank you all. I just clarify, when you were talking in your report in the beginning, you ad-libbed at one point. Did you say that you're expecting to be short 40,000 skilled workers? Was that the number I heard?
Yes.
On page 2 of your report, you were saying it was difficulty to find skilled workers to replace retiring employees. Was that number 40,000?
Yes, that's correct. The report in Northwestern Ontario looked at, over the next 5 years, number of mines that they expect to be opening, plus then the age of the workforce in Northwestern Ontario. And they felt that over the next 5 years, they're going to need 40,000 people to take these new jobs and the retirement jobs. And it just happened to be by coincidence a similar number in a report that was done in Northeastern Ontario that also looked at, you know, new mines coming on stream, but plus, you know, people retiring, and it just happened to be a similar number. And we were struck by just the size of those numbers. The Ring of Fire alone is talking about creating 5,500 jobs if and when it gets off the ground.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. DiMatteo, Ms. Setlaqui, and Mr. Perreault. Thank you.
Thanks, Chair. Thank you.
We will suspend for a few minutes while Canadian Northern Economic Development Agency comes forward. Convene, welcome Ms. King, President of the Canadian Northern Economic Development Agency, and with you Mr. Miller, who is Chief Financial Officer and Director of Corporate Services, and Mr. Spence, Director General, Northern Projects Management Office. Welcome. You have the floor. You'll, I assume, have a presentation, and we'll go to questions.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for the invitation to appear before this committee. As noted, my name is Janet King, and I'm the President of the Canadian Northern Economic Development Agency, more commonly known as CanNor. Je suis ici pour vous parler du Nord canadien.
I'm here to talk of the Canadian North, more particularly about Yukon, Northwest Territories, and Nunavut. I'm also here to speak of the work that CanNor is doing to respond to the challenges the region is facing and to support opportunities.
40% of Canada's landmass. It includes 75 communities and 119,000 people, or 0.3% of Canada's total population. 49% of the population lives in the 3 territorial capitals, while the balance live in small and very dispersed communities. The territorial economies are dominated by the public sector, which contributes 30% to the territory's GDP, and resource extraction, which contributes 19%. The balance is a mix of smaller sectors led by construction, real estate, and transportation. The territories experienced substantive GDP growth rates in recent years, spurred in particular by the mining industry. However, their growth is expected to be much more modest for this and the coming years, largely due to low commodity prices. The recent Territorial Economic Outlook from the Conference Board of Canada forecasts that real economic growth is expected to average only 1.8% over the period 2016 to 2020, with the Yukon's economy the hardest hit with the closing of its last large-scale mine. However, their longer-term outlook is expected to improve again as commodity prices recover and new mining projects come online. These cycles exemplify the importance of the resource industry as the current economic driver for the North, but also the importance and the need to diversify. The North is a region with much opportunity. About 23% of its population is under 15 years old, compared to 16% elsewhere in Canada. This young and vibrant population has much potential for the future and is already advancing to productive roles and leadership positions. The North also has a vast land area with a rich and diverse resource potential still to be sustainably harnessed. The North also has wide-ranging opportunities to innovate, to diversify its economic activities, and to build on its natural assets. For example, the value of the fishery in Nunavut has more than doubled over the last 10 years. Biomass and wind energy industries are being established in the NWT and Yukon, contributing to green growth. And specific tourism segments, such as the market for viewing northern lights in the Northwest Territories, have been increasingly successful in recent years. Cela étant dit, il existe.
This said, there are real challenges to northern economic growth.
A fundamental barrier to growth. Over half of communities do not have year-round road access, and despite facing on 2 oceans, there is a lack of port facilities, large or small, to support marine-based activities. Connectivity infrastructure is also lacking. Internet speed continues to lag behind levels elsewhere in Canada, and the cost of these services for users remains much higher. De plus, seulement la moitié des résidents.
As well, only half of working-age northerners, and only a quarter of them in Nunavut, have a grade 12 education, limiting their ability to participate fully in the economy. This limits their participation in the economy, and many businesses still depend on a fly-in, fly-out workforce.
Discuss how CanNor works to build on the North's opportunities and to help address its challenges. Created in 2009, CanNor has an annual budget of $55.4 million and a staff complement of 80. It is headquartered in Iqaluit, with offices in the 3 territorial capitals as well as a liaison office here in Ottawa. About 3/4 of our staff are based in the North and 1/4 are Indigenous. Notre agence a pour mandat d'aider les résidents.
The agency's mandate is to strengthen Northerners' ability to seize economic opportunities in the North and to foster the development of key economic sectors in the region.
Of Cannor's current funding activities and how we are investing to foster economic activity and diversification in the North. Through our Strategic Investments in Economic Development program, known as SINED, a program focused on promoting economic diversification and growth, Cannor supported 60 projects totaling $17.4 million in contribution funding this past year. This also allowed the agency to help new and emerging industries, as well as capacity building in small and medium enterprises. Funding in these sectors leverages investments from our partners, and we work routinely in partnership with the territorial governments, Indigenous organizations, and the private sector, allowing impacts to be maximized. Last year, for example, this meant leveraging investments close to a ratio of 1-to-1 with our northern partners. Cannor also invests directly in the growth of Indigenous businesses through our Northern Aboriginal Economic Opportunities Program, which is funded at $10.8 million per year. In 2015-16 alone, we supported 63 projects, including 3 equity funds to be used to support Indigenous businesses across the North, delivered through local service partners already established in the communities. La demande augmente, et nous croyons...
Demand is increasing, and we believe that Cannor funding makes a real difference. I am pleased to report to this committee that 79% of the Indigenous businesses that Cannor helped with foundational support are still in operation today.
Education program, delivered with the 3 northern colleges, Cannor has invested in improving the literacy, numeracy, and other essential workplace skills of Indigenous adults. To date, this program has helped over 3,400 Northerners gain important skills needed to participate more fully in the labor market. Cannor met de plus en oeuvre les volets
Cannor also delivers regional components of national programs, such as the Canada 150 Community Infrastructure Program.
Business line unique amongst the regional development agencies, the Northern Projects Management Office, referred to as NPMO. This office supports efficient and transparent environmental assessment processes in the North. It does this through coordination of federal regulatory departments' involvement, advisory and pathfinding support, and coordination of federal Crown consultations. The NPMO is currently working with over 50 companies and tracking over 30 major projects engaged in environmental assessment processes. These projects represent the potential for more than $22 billion in capital investment and more than 10,000 jobs for the North if they were to be realized. The NPMO also works very closely with communities to help them plan and prepare for nearby resource development so that they can maximize the economic benefits and manage the impacts the projects may have on them. In closing, Mr. Chair, Canada is stronger when our North is stronger. Cannor's goal is to foster and support a prosperous and resilient North. We will continue to invest in development and diversification and to assist with effective environmental assessment processes. I thank you for the opportunity to speak with you today, and I will be pleased to answer any questions you may have. Kwanamik, Masicho, merci. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. King. Mr. Greywall, 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Madam King, and your colleagues for coming here today. First and foremost, let me congratulate you on your support for Indigenous people. And I'm very pleased to hear that 79% of the companies that you're supporting are still in business with that particular focus. I just want to confirm a few things. Your budget, was it $54 million?
55 million.
55 million? And is that per year?
Yes.
And how much of that is committed, like for ongoing projects from year to year?
We work. We have about 50% multi-year commitments, 2 to 3 years, not longer than that. And we have been working largely on a continuous intake process as well. So it is maybe 50% committed at this time.
I've asked this question to every development agency. For the $54 million, is there a metric that's used to see how much dollar for dollar is invested back or creates economic growth? So for each dollar invested, you get $5 return in GDP?
Right. We are working towards those kinds of measures. Our measures right now are very project focused. Over the last 2 years, we've been working to build more comprehensive measures so that we can build towards that understanding.
Okay, I would highly encourage that that be a priority for the agency. Metrics are incredibly important to justify the funding that you get, because the next question is this, is that if we give you more funding, are you guys currently oversubscribed? Like, what's the value of projects coming in? Are there really good projects that are being turned down that would create economic opportunities in the north, but because you've already maxed out, you're unable to fund them?
I think our best example right now is that in June, we released a call for expression of interest for clean technology projects across the north. We received over 60 applications. We're now working on due diligence for 11 of those to bring through. So it gives a sample of the kind of demand that's out there.
Great demand. One of the challenges that you said is the lack of infrastructure, and I think everybody around the table will agree upon that. And then education, again, I don't think that you have any concerns there. The fly-in, fly-out is of concern to me. If we solve the first two challenges, which would be the infrastructure and the education, how do we maintain the population in the north to keep on building, in their regions? I think Atlantic Canada, Mr. Chair was telling as well, is young Canadians that are growing up there they might stay for post-secondary education, but if they don't, then they move to the bigger cities, whether it be Toronto, Calgary, Montreal. What are your thoughts on that issue?
Several thoughts, if I may. Some of the fly-in, fly-out is very much cost-based as well, skills-based, where to find the skills, the knowledge that's needed to run those enterprises, activity, projects, whatever they are. So fundamentally, it's building local skills capacity and how to achieve that. That being said, I can say that for parts of the north as well, people really want to stay and live there. People who are born and raised in those communities would prefer to stay. They would like to work near the communities, with their communities. So retaining people in the north is not the critical issue.
Thank you, I appreciate that. My last question, can you give us an example of the ideal project that you guys have funded? So like your poster child for your agency.
I can think of several.
Pick one.
One, I think, that covers a number of bases and that I'm proud of. I can say that because it was started before I arrived at Canmore 2 years ago. And it was our contribution to building the biomass sector in the NWT. And it's also impacting in Yukon. But we were able to work with partners, including entrepreneurs, Aboriginal communities, and a priority of the territorial government very early in the concept. And year over year, work with the entrepreneur, needs, communities, building the planning, the feasibility, the technology, so that year over year, essentially now we can say a bioproducts sector is being established, and it's embedded in the local Aboriginal communities, providing local wealth.
Thank you. One more?
10 seconds if you can do it. Ms. Raitt.
Sorry, thank you. I didn't mean to say yes. Thank you very much for being here. I will tell you that I was in Iqaluit August, I want to say 13th, for a roundtable with the Chamber. So I have some questions coming out of that, if you don't mind. I said that I would bring them up with folks if I ever ran into you, and guess what? You're here. So I have a few questions. First of all, and maybe this is the Major Projects Management Office can help me on this. What's the status of online staking? And how close are we to getting this sorted out so that the mining companies can get on with it? And is there anything that you can do at Canmore to help it out?
So thank you for the question. And in fact, you are right. There's an online staking process that's being developed by Indigenous Affairs, and it's getting close to being implemented. The issue really is that it started in Nunavut, and so there's also Inuit-owned land And so what the big issue right at the moment is trying to get alignment between the regional Inuit associations and INAC on staking. So there's actually going to be a workshop with all of the regional Inuit associations, ourselves, and INAC next week, but it's been pushed off because we're dealing with the Nunavut land use plan next week. Okay, and but we're working towards it, and I think we'll find alignment. One of the underlying issues is protection for caribou, and you'll find it also in the Nunavut land use plan. And certainly, caribou are a very fundamental part of Inuit culture, and so they want to implement some measures because they're facing declining caribou herds, and so we need to have some discussions around what is it that's leading to these significant declines in the caribou, so then we can then come up with informed science-based protection measures.
Could somebody explain what online staking is?
Oh, sorry.
I can, but you can too. It means you don't have to take a helicopter and physically tap in a stake for people to make claims for the purposes of mining in the future.
Thank you. Go ahead.
Is that okay? Okay, I have some skills from Anarcan days. Second question has to do with the Nunavut land use plan. The way it's been pitched to me from the mining sector up there, that it's going to kill exploration. And they're very concerned about the process.
Yes, thank you for that question, and I think that's an important question, because you're right. Right now, there's some fundamental work that needs to be done with the Nunavut Planning Commission to look at a more evidence-based approach to again, it's the caribou herds that are really the preoccupation of the Inuit. So we need to work on determining why there's significant declines in the caribou populations. I think one of the herds has gone from 450,000 down to 16,000 caribou, and there's moratoriums on hunting. So we're actually in some ways infringing on those Indigenous rights. So we need to take a more science-based, evidence-based approach to looking at that. And the vast geography sometimes limits our ability to get out there and actually figure out what's going on, and we need to incorporate more traditional knowledge. We have the Cleacho as an example this summer. So the Cleacho are in the NWT, but they hunt herds. Those herds don't. There's no borders, and so they're going out and they're testing their traditional knowledge, and they're going to bring that information back, and that all helps to inform us in terms of what's going on. So, and that will help inform the protection measures that the NPC wants to put in place in terms of protecting caribou, and protecting caribou calving grounds to ensure industrial development doesn't impact on it. But at the same time, we have to be balanced in our approach. So we need to ensure that we have a sustainable exploration industry, because that's how you have a sustainable mining industry. And given the contribution that mining and resource development makes to the North, it's important.
It's a big deal. So 2 questions specific to your organization. A complaint that I heard is that not when programs are available, when construction, infrastructure, and you guys do actually facilitate infrastructure stuff for federal government in terms of, I believe, RFPs. Anyway, what they're indicating is that Southern companies are coming in to compete with local companies. They don't have capacity in local companies, therefore it makes local selection very difficult. And the question was whether or not there's a possibility to amend to have a local content part of the analysis when you're doing RFPs. I don't know if it's going to be with you guys. The second question I had specifically to you is, are you making announcements on Canada 150 projects? Because there is a big day that's being planned next year, my understanding, Nunavut Day, August 1st, and they really want to get on with it. So can you let me know if you're going to be making any announcements on their funding?
Right. Yes. We do not do any procurement or do any direct construction in Nunavut, so we would not be involved in those processes.
Okay, thanks.
Yes, we will be making announcements on Canada 150, and we would certainly hope to have them well prepared in advance of Nunavut Day next year.
Okay, and what are you doing with cruise ships? Are you helping facilitate what they did this year up in Cambridge Bay and want to continue to do it?
Actually, we had an interesting role in that, and that was they knew the very large ship, the Crystal Serenity, was showing up, and they wanted to take optimal advantage of that with the community, have the community ready to be able to receive that number of passengers and potential buyers. So we actually funded the Nunavut Arts and Craft Association to mobilize the artists to hold their annual meeting and training session in Cambridge Bay at the same time as the Crystal Serenity came through, So the arts and crafts members of Nunavut were mobilized and in Cambridge Bay and ready to receive the many paying customers of the Crystal Serenity. That seemed to have worked very well. I've heard very large, record amounts of money spent in the community at that time, which serves our artisans very well.
Excellent.
That'll be it.
Then we can talk about
a little
CRA another time, but okay.
A little over time. Mr. Caron.
Merci beaucoup et merci pour la présentation.
Thank you, and thank you for your presentation. I've been looking over the programs that you have presented.
I'm just looking at the successes or what you're promoting as successes in terms of the strategic investments in the economic development program, the Northern Adult Basic Education Program and Northern Projects Management Office. Now, when I'm looking at the plans and priorities for 2016-17, it basically says that those programs are due to be sunset. Obviously, that's a government decision. At this point, what can we know about the future of those programs? What can we know about the future funding and the future commitment towards these programs?
The Signed program has always been a cyclical program, so this is nothing new for our organization. It was renewed in budget 2016 for 2 years. We are busily strengthening our performance measures, our business analysis, and so on, so that we can bring forward the best possible investment case to the government next year. I would say echo the same comments on each one of our programs that are sunsetting programs.
And each of them have been reconducted for 2 years?
Each one has a different length.
Okay.
For example, the Northern Project Management Office initiative was renewed for 4 years.
Okay.
And there are reasons each time for the number of years that it's renewed.
And the renewal was announced earlier this year during
That's
budget?
right.
Okay. So I'll take it that the plans and priorities were actually developed prior to the budget, so prior to you having any indication.
Right, that's right.
I understand. Let me talk about another element that you actually talked about in your presentation, which is broadband. It's a major problem, but I can see why it's even bigger, much bigger of a problem in northern Canada. My understanding is that for the coverage of most of the territory, we cannot rely on basically regular infrastructure, but we have to rely on satellite coverage, which actually is being studied and has been studied in the past and is still being studied by the CRTC. What's the solution? I mean, satellite, and I do have the problem in my own region because we have very low density. Many people, many communities rely on satellite, and they actually come to me because it doesn't, the coverage itself doesn't fulfill the promises that are made to them by the providers. I expect the same for the north. And it's becoming more of a problem because the lag between the high-speed internet through the traditional infrastructure and what's called high-speed internet or high-speed coverage with satellite, the gap is becoming wider and wider, which is making those regions a lot less competitive by the minute. How do we deal with that?
Mm-hmm. Yes, we support advancing the communication capacity of the North in a variety of ways. But first, I just need to be clear, in Yukon, it's fairly efficient. It's a lot of land-based fiber and so on, except for one community in Yukon. In the NWT, it's a bit mixed. The southern is more connected. The north served by satellite. Nunavut's entirely satellite-based, so it is the most exposed in terms of reliable, fast, cost-effective connectivity. And as you note, this is essential to truly participate in the modern economy and compete. So we understand all of that. We've worked in supporting feasibility studies for different technologies to apply. We work closely with our colleagues in innovation, science, and economic development on the connectivity side to deeply understand the northern challenges through the studies we've funded. We also, I co-chaired with my departmental colleagues a roundtable in Nunavut in June, I believe, June, with the diverse stakeholders there looking at possible solutions. and understanding what their interest and interest would be in the connectivity fund announced in budget 2016 as well, and looking how to be ready to apply for that funding.
And what's the reality for cell coverage? We rely on the same technology basically, and cell coverage is actually and the ability to basically communicate with cell phones in areas which don't necessarily have landlines is actually also important for competitivity. I saw you move your head. You're not really knowledgeable on this issue?
Well, I'm not technically knowledgeable, but I do know how people use and need that kind of connectivity, whether it be for long-distance education, which is so desirable in some of the far-flung communities, healthcare, and in the world I focus mostly on these days in terms of doing business, real-time business. Having access to useful cell phone coverage is essential.
Thank you very much, Guy. It's a problem everywhere. You run into bad cell phone coverage, even on PEI. Mr. Ouellette.
Thank you very much, Chair. Thank you very much for coming as well, Mrs. King and Mr. Spence and Mr. Miller. I was just wondering, have you heard of the new or the internet cable that's being strung from Asia to Europe that's going right through the Arctic Circle, essentially the Northwest Passage for internet?
It was previously known as Arctic Fiber Project. The Arctic Fiber Project has been bought out by another consortium. I think they're right now, or this summer, laying cable in Alaska and beginning to build their fiber network there.
Are we participating in any way, the federal government, in this project?
At this point, we are not participating. It is one of a number of proposals and possibilities that are out there that are being developed and pursued as possible solutions to the connectivity problem.
Because what I understand is they have nodes where you have to you can hook into in order to get the high speed, and I think it's 30 terabytes per second is the speed, which would largely exceed anything probably the Northwest Territories, Nunavut, and Yukon would ever need. But you actually have to, when you're laying the cable originally, you actually have to build the node so you can hook into it later. And right now, it's very cheap to do it because they're building it. But if you wait until it's done and then you show up 15 years later and say, we'd like to hook in, well, the costs are enormous because there's already this large amount of data going back and forth. And so, you know, I think when I'm looking at that, I'm thinking to myself, geez, this is an opportunity. And so do you know if the government is intending on looking into this infrastructure project, which could be transformative for Nunavut and northern parts of the Northwest Territories as well as the Yukon, which is being built right now?
It's my understanding that that business case was submitted to different parts of the federal government a couple of years ago. It was a very expensive project. They did go ahead to prove the feasibility of the project. If I understand correctly, if I recall correctly, they actually have the permitting done for where the cable would actually touch land. So they did a lot of homework. It was a very expensive project, and I can note that now there are other competing ideas out there as well, including fiber.
But even just to create the nodes would be probably, you know, the ability to hook in later on if they had the money. But if you don't do that now, the costs go up enormously into the future. So it could be a lost opportunity that we're losing for.
I do understand that the case and the proposal was submitted to the departments that could be engaged in funding it.
Okay. But we haven't heard anything. It sounds like a budget ask, yeah. I was wondering as well if you could talk about roads. You're talking about how there's you know, if you go from the Northwest Territories, you have to go into the Yukon in order to come back into the Northwest Territories through the northern side. And from east to west, back east again. And I was wondering, roads are important because you can't get out resources unless there's roads. You know, have you heard very much about what's going on with that?
We hear a lot about roads, and my colleague Mr. Spence hears a lot about roads in the major project world as well. Again, in Yukon, all communities are connected by road except for one. There's a desire to continuously strengthen and extend that road network. They have the road, the Dempster Highway that connects up to Inuvik and is going to be connecting to the Arctic Ocean with the Tuktoyaktuk Highway. The NWT has a road network in the south, but no roads in the north. Nunavut has no roads, of course. So In the NWT, there's also a significant interest in 3 road corridors, I believe they're talking about right now. One, to continue to extend up the Mackenzie Valley and connecting the suite of communities up the Mackenzie Valley, let's say connecting Yellowknife to Inuvik and Tuktoyaktuk. That's one corridor that the GNWT is pursuing with enthusiasm. There's a road to Wati, Tlicho community that is looking forward to be connected with an all-weather road. A lot of these have winter roads, but it would be beneficial to have an all-weather road, and that would also connect to a mining project there and allow it to become developed as well. There is interest both by the government of Nunavut and the GNWT in another significant corridor that would connect the Coronation Gulf down to the road network on the east side of the Northwest Territories as well. So there are several significant corridors that are being considered, researched, and pursued.
In need of funding.
They're expensive. Building up there is very expensive and seasonal, so they are in need of funding.
But transformative for the economy.
They would be profoundly transformative for the economy as well as for the social health of the communities that could be connected.
Thank you both. Mr. McColman.
Thank you for coming. Just interested, you mentioned during your presentation that the last large mine shut down. What type of mining was that?
It will shut down, and my expert here.
It's a base metal mine, and so they ship out concentrate through Skagway.
Okay, and is it just is it because of the age of the mine, or what are the factors leading to its shutdown?
Yeah, it's at the end of its economic life now. But there's a couple of new emerging projects in the Yukon that will pick up and will start to help contribute to the economy. There's a gold project that was just picked up by Goldcorp, Kaminak, and then there's a large copper base metal project that's called Casino, and it's quite a substantial project. It's about a $2.5 billion capital investment, and it'll produce a lot of jobs. So we're going to see a bit of a dip in the economy in the Yukon, but it's going to start to pick up probably 2018, I think is.
Excellent. What if any impacts have there been on your region due to the recent decline in oil prices and or the concurrent decrease in the Canadian dollar exchange rate?
Can I answer that? So thank you for the question. I think with the oil and gas, the problem is it's very expensive to extract oil and gas in the north, and you don't have a lot of infrastructure. So at one point we were looking at building the Mackenzie gas pipeline down the valley to ship the 3 trillion cubic feet of natural gas we have up in the Mackenzie Delta. But the environmental assessment took so long that the opportunity at the end of the day was missed. So oil and gas remains, there's plenty of oil and gas, but it's just hard to get out and very expensive, sort of $150 barrel of oil kind of thing, right? But gold is becoming increasingly an interesting commodity there, and there's a lot more interest lately, and it's because of the price differential of the dollar. So the 30% reduction in the dollar means that, and it's about $1,100 or $1,200 or $1,300 an ounce, I think, right now. But when you add that 30%, then it's about a $1,600 to $1,700 an ounce Canadian. And if you're producing in Canada dollars, so Agnico Eagle has the Meadowbank mine near Baker Lake, and their production costs are just under $700 an ounce. So you can see that there's some significant margin in that, and so there's a bunch of ground that's been picked up around Yellowknife by a couple of companies, and there's much more interest in gold. And gold are the projects that are getting permitted in Nunavut right now, and they will contribute to the economy as we go forward.
Thank you very much.
That it? Mr. McKinnon.
Thank you very much. Thank you and welcome. Excellent presentation, very informative. I've been asking most of the development agencies about where you see the bright spots. Obviously, in the north, somewhat sector limited, but tourism immediately comes to mind. Could you expand a little bit on tourism development in the north? As someone who's paddled at least one of the great rivers, I know firsthand about what a wonderful experience that is, but could you talk a little more broadly about private sector tourism development?
Certainly I could. I'll go by territory perhaps, starting with the NWT. The NWT tourism sector is burgeoning these days. They have been very successful in expanding their marketing internationally and expanding from what had been a very strong Japanese market to the Chinese market. So you can see a new hotel just opened this month, a very large new hotel in Yellowknife to accommodate, in large part, the new tourists who are coming to see the aurora. And then build other activities as well. So the NWT is welcoming any number of new international visitors. Yukon has a solid tourism industry based on their history and their culture. They have access to the Deepwater Port at Skagway, they have road access, and they have the Alaska Highway for thoroughfares, so they have drive-throughs. They're also exploring more in ecotourism and indigenous tourism. For example, in Carcross recently, the local First Nation was able to open up what is now a world-class mountain biking destination, and it's building other tourism possibilities around it. So that's a tremendous new input to diversifying just the tourism sector in Yukon that is completely friendly to that First Nations use of their land. So that's another good news story. In Nunavut, little more distant, little hard to get to. We're working closely, for example, with Parks Canada as they work to build tourism access and interest in their northern parks, generated in no small part these days as well by the discovery of the Terror and the Erebus. Has tweaked a lot of interest in northern parks. So we work closely with them to invest in small communities, tourism centers, ways that they can greet these tourists who have come a long, long ways, and so providing some of the community-based infrastructure to support that.
Because your mandate must, of necessity, be so expansive and extend to perhaps even beyond the traditional role of regional development, just any development, I suppose, would constitute regional development in some communities. Could you maybe, through us to Canadians, tell us, what regional development looks like in the north, and what kinds of things you're prepared to consider? What kinds of things would you like to consider if you had additional resources that could maybe help guide us as we put together some recommendations? But could you just perhaps comment on your interaction with your other colleagues across the country and where you may differ in terms of your approach?
I think one of the particular ways we differ is that we continue to work to build a foundational economy. We're not working with a very advanced economy. It's still foundational. We're still talking roads as an essential investment, as one of the fundamental barriers to efficient growth. We're still talking connectivity at a fairly fundamental level. So the foundational aspects of economic growth, that's why we're in the business of feasibility studies for roads. It's probably less business for some of the other RDAs. So again, those barriers at the foundational level. We work a great deal as well with skills and capacity building. Many of our communities are remote. Many of them have not great access to education services and so on. So we work a great deal with skills development, entrepreneurial skills development, and Aboriginal skills development. For example, we're concluding the 5th year of our Aboriginal adult basic education program, and we'll be putting forward a case for renewal of that. And it has had, I gave some statistics in my opening remarks, but the ability to support the colleges in reaching out to the mid-generation, to the young adults who probably quit school in grade 9 or 10 and go out and have life and decide they want to rejoin the productive economy. It's targeted at those people. The colleges have had tremendous success in delivering those, and we're looking forward to continuing to partner with them in delivering those kinds of services.
Sorry, Steve, we will, but if you guys got to catch a plane, don't worry, there'll be no votes. John, last questions.
Just a couple really quick questions. The Northern Basic Education Program, 3,400 Northerners. What's the language breakdown of that in terms of official languages? Mainly English, or is there any Francophone participation in that as well?
I would say the dominant language breakdown would be Indigenous languages. So a lot of that is delivered in the communities and in Yukon, in NWT, so they would be working, it would be dominantly English.
No, very good.
And plus Indigenous languages.
Okay, very good. Second question, very quickly: the $22 billion in capital investment. Is any of that Indigenous-led? Is there any Indigenous-led businesses participating in that?
There is, but it's at its infancy. So right now, we've been working with INEC, and it's primarily around remediation projects. So getting these guys getting them used to the fact that working around a big industrial project, and we find that because we're so involved in the remediation part of it, it's an excellent opportunity to help build a base again, as Dr. King was saying. So that base is important, and we continue to encourage DEMCO, as an example, as a Denendeh Development Corporation in the NWT that's owned by all of the Indigenous Dene, and that has been given a mandate to get involved in the mining business.
Thank you very much. Do you have anything? I think that's it for questions. Do you have anything you want to add, Ms. King?
No, I appreciated the questions and the ability to tell you a little bit about the economy of the North.
Thank you very much. I think with all the RDAs this week, we've had a kind of a substantive history of the regional variations in the economy. So it's really been useful for us as well. So with that, we will thank you very much for your presentations and your forthright answers. We do have a couple of quick issues to deal with. So thank you, Ms. King, Mr. Miller, Mr. Spence. The recommendations from the proposed recommendations from the parties on the CRA report will be mailed out to all the members tomorrow, emailed, I guess. So you have time to think about them before the meetings the first of the week. The other issue that we have to deal with is there is some members would like to take staff with them on either one or the other of the travel. The rules are that no house resources be used for staff to travel. I think everyone understands that. But if there's, I guess, Susie, what are the snags we could run into? Does anybody have a problem with staff? We get a bus going. If there's availability on it, they can take the bus. We'll have meals at some areas. Can they participate or not? Those kind of little. As long as they carry Lisa's bags, I guess that's the is there a problem with that? Okay, we're all right with that. Is there any other issues we had to deal with? Then I thank everyone for their indulgence this week. I do think we had a very interesting week. Go ahead, Phil.
One quick question on that. Obviously, it's one or more of your staff. How many?
I think just the one. Just I think one staffer, is it? That's going to. I think.
One. Yeah. Okay.
Be about one.
Okay.
Okay. Then thanks everyone for their indulgence this week. It really has been. I think it was good to have the RDAs in. It gave us a perspective we don't normally get. So meeting adjourned. See you Monday.